Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Turned Out a Punk Classics, where we take an old episode and bring it back to the feed, restoring it to its former glory. And today on the show, because we're continuing the celebration of my band Fucked Up's brand new record, Another Day, which is released today, we are posting a old episode, Jonah Falco, from the band Fucked Up, also of Career Suicide, also mixer of Alexis on Fire and producer of bands like Chubby and the Gang and The Chisel and High Viz, onto the show. One of the nicest people in the world, one of my favorite people in the world. And he would want you to know, just as much as I do, that Fucked Up has this brand new record. You can find out more information at fuckedup.cc. Or if you are in Toronto when this drops on August the 9th, the release day of the show, you can come by Emissions Records at 6 o'clock p.m. And I will be selling a special edition of this record. And I will be also hosting a podcast of some sort. And you will be able to hang out with me, and I will be able to hang out with you. And it'll be very fun for me, maybe for you too, but definitely be fun for me. So come on down. And if you can't make it, you can also order this record from Emissions Records as well, the limited version. And if you're in Canada, it's cheaper postage than some of the options in the States too. So that's good for you, I guess, hopefully. And if not from Canada, maybe it's a little more expensive to get. But this is the Turned Out a Punk colorway and all this sort of stuff. So come on down or order it, and I will hopefully see you enjoying it or talk to you about it. And if not, thanks for getting it anyway, I guess. Anyway, all right, that's it for me. Sit back, relax, enjoy Jonah Falco on Turned Out a Punk Classics. Don't worry, Jonah.
You got your levels set.
This isn't your realm. This is my realm, buddy.
This is your world.
I'm so used to you controlling my audio destiny, and now I control yours.
I'll be like, this is gonna be one of those moments where I'm like, my voice really sounds like that.
No, your voice sounds cool. You've got a cool sounding voice. People have always said that you are the low key most talented member of this band. Myself included. I've definitely very much held that opinion for a long time now. Sorry, that's the tea bag dropping out of my tea.
That's how civilized we're doing this morning.
Exactly.
This is like a nice, like a little Monday morning. We got tea. There's like soft lighting.
Well, you have the most English cottage feeling house in all of Toronto. So
it's
very beautiful and nice.
Well, thank you very much. No, for you listeners out there, as you know, Damian can attest, being in Fucked Up, the raging and psychedelic punk band, we really live the image. So yes, there is a bit of a cottage vibe, but it's also in this like really horrible feel. There's like lots of precarious stuff around here.
Yeah, it's like that house in Clockwork Orange. Too.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's like little mini Corova, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But no, thank you so much for having me over to do this, buddy.
My pleasure. You have such a cool podcast. I'm really psyched to be on it. Thank you.
Well, I'm kind of thinking now every year I'm going to try and interview a member of the band until ultimately I get to Mike and he refuses to do it.
Okay. I have a feeling that in a year from now, or even 4 years, however many members you have left, I'm under the impression that like by the time you get to Mike, he'll be ready.
You think?
Yeah. So, and he'll have notes, and it'll be like probably the funniest thing ever. Because I think there was a time long ago where weren't you gonna interview Mike, or Mike was gonna interview you for a zine, for like Fucked Up related. You did.
He did. He interviewed all of us.
Oh no, not
rock and roll.
No, not the fake one.
Well, that was a real interview. None of us knew it was fake.
No, that's exactly. But wait a minute. Are we allowed to admit in public that was a staged interview?
The statute of limitations is well up on that.
It's expired.
But in the Maximum Rock and Roll, for people who don't know,
yeah,
there was this interview.
Yes.
And we were interviewed by a gentleman by the name of David Iliad.
No, wait a minute. It was for Heart Attack.
No, it was for Max Rock and Roll.
Maximum is the one that Mike just interviewed himself.
Oh, that's right. That's right. With a fake person.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're right. Heart Attack was the one where we got interviewed by David Iliad.
Yeah, actually, I fell for that interview hook, line, and sinker, which I was my usual sort of like state of existence in communicating is could be summed up by the word lag. I like take a long time to get back to people because I'm just a bit disorganized, and I was really like struggling to, psychologically find the time to answer those questions, and Mike kept very gently nudging me like, hey, have you gotten back to David? Hey, have you gotten back to so-and-so? And I was like, I'll do it. And I just wrote the worst answers to these otherwise like really generous questions that everybody else seemed to take in stride and have really intelligent answers for. But I just would like shot off the most inane.
I gotta go back and read that thing.
Oh man, it's terrible. It's just I haven't read it since I read it, but I remember looking at like your answers and Sandy and Josh's answers and just thinking like, I've wasted this opportunity. And then it turns into this big publicity stunt.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is Mike is definitely, when he wants to be, as only us can attest to, one of the most verbose people in the world, and will not shut up sometimes. And then other times he is shut off to the world.
He is tight-lipped.
Unlike anyone else. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the side most people see.
Well, it's funny, you know, being a kind of public figure. How do you navigate being really open and really forward and like letting yourself out? Like you guys are kind of the yin and yang in that sense, because you're like the outward and accommodating and welcoming presence that sort of like breaks down the barrier of the band being so mysterious. But Mike is like, well, you know, if I do that, then I kind of lose all the foothold that I've had creating this world, right?
Yeah,
and so it's like it must be difficult to try and let go of that.
Yep. No, he will be the last one, I think.
Yeah.
For this thing.
Well, that's good.
We're not here to talk about Mike, Jonah.
Let's get back to me.
We're here to talk about you.
Let's do this.
So I'm going to start this off the way I start them all off.
All right.
Which is, how'd you get in punk? Do you remember the first time you ever came across the genre?
Yeah. I think the first time I ever came across the genre, I was maybe like 12 or 13 years old. Mm-hmm. I believe your brother was in the room, actually, Tristan. And he had just brought a Green Day CD into school or something like that. And somebody said, is that one of those bands that has a fake English accent and just screams about nothing? And your brother said, like, no, it's this new Green Day bootleg. I just got it on Yonge Street or something, and it's amazing. And he put it on, and that was the first time I think I remember, like, hearing punk on purpose.
Yeah.
Like, or no, not on purpose. Like, the word had been in my mind, but that was like this weird thing. Actually, I haven't thought of it until now that Green Day was kind of the first landing party. And a member of your family, which is very, like, fitting. After that, my first real, like, I got into...
Did you, like, I guess, like, had you heard... Like, were you listening to CFNY, or did you, like, check out any of that stuff by that point? Nirvana?
Yeah.
That kind of happened, right?
Well, yeah, when I was like, listening to the radio.
Right?
I'm young. I was listening to the radio, and I knew about Nirvana, and I think the first, like, rock tape I ever got was Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger.
Okay.
And I got really into grunge, like, mainstream grunge, like Nirvana, Soundgarden, Nine Inch Nails... and my imagination was kind of limited, so Mudhoney, so like a little bit, but like sort of typical taste for the like late 90s or like mid 90s, I guess.
Yeah.
And and then I knew about punk, and I didn't really experience it until like I went on a trip with a school trip to Ottawa, and I remember. It's a much better story than hearing your brother say that he bought a Green Day CD. This is my first thing.
Well, I remember that. Do you remember that CD store though that was beside HMV that used to have all the crazy bootlegs?
Yeah,
it was like.
Sorry, that's a train.
No, that's awesome. Now it adds the urban reality to
exactly.
the.
It's fucking stark in here. It's like a single light bulb swinging back and forth.
No, it offsets everything we said though in the beginning. Now you're giving a totally different description of what's actually going on. We're lit by a beautiful skylight.
There's hanging plants. Okay. That's the thing about getting into music then too, which was great, is that there were all these. I mean, you can still find a bootleg, but all these funny pockets of like, what the hell is in here, and like why? Like you would buy the wrong thing. And you could get introduced to the most popular band in the world the wrong way.
Yeah, absolutely. Like and I think that store on Yonge Street though was, like kind of like the perfect symbol of the era where like music was still so hard to get that you could sell bootlegged live recordings of dubious quality at a premium because they're the only way you'd hear it.
Yeah. Okay, to finish the story, I was 12. We went to Ottawa. I went to the Rideau Centre. I bought Nevermind the Bollocks on cassette, which I still have, and I listened to it, and it like blew my mind. And I bought orange hair dye in a can from the It store, and a chain necklace, and spray painted my head orange, and came home. I would believe I was dropped off somehow from this school trip, I ended up getting dropped off at my Italian grandparents' house with orange hair and like a chain necklace. And they were just mortified. And the look of disappointment and horror on their faces. I mean, these are people, bless them, but, you know, they didn't want to see that. And I was just like, it'll wash out, it'll wash out, it'll wash out. And they're like, go wash it out right now.
I think that's something that definitely shapes your punk experience, is this, like, kind of very conservative as far as
Looks,
looks definitely, and aesthetics generally associated with punk.
Yeah.
Foreboding kind of family.
I never got the. I experimented to a certain extent, but you know, actually when I was like really young, I had spiky hair, and I thought that was crazy. And then like, you know, in my punk phase, there was. Most of my friends weren't the kind of like extreme punk people with like Liberty Spikes and like I knew people like that, but it just sort of it didn't stick with me. And everybody I knew kind of dressed more like a hardcore or whatever, or like, you know, just like ratty clothes, skate punk, stuff like that. Yeah. And then for me, I've always had to have this funny duality where my musical taste and like the political taste, it's not, I don't come from like a hugely conservative family, just like solid working class family, but like everybody's just really calm and like not impressed by extreme behavior. So I just sort of always had to at least once a week just tone it down.
Yeah, like I would say conservative, not politically, but conservative as far as mores.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my uncle who was in no ways like he was totally down. He's like, yeah, you like punk, you like those crazy freaks. All right, yeah, that's cool, man. Why don't you like shave your head or something? And I had him buy. I asked for like a copy of any Black Flag record for Christmas, and he's, of course, like you could do that if you were in the know. But he went through some like hook or crook back alley. He's like, I know a guy that can like find things. He gave me a copy of Everything Went Black, and he handed it to me, and he's like, hey, just so you know, I had to look at the song titles on here. These guys are fucking crazy. These people are fucked up. And I was like, oh yeah? And he's like, I know you like it, but just so you know, I mean, it's punk, so it's screwed up in the head, but it's for you. And I was just like, okay. And so, I mean...
Was that a CD or a...
It was a CD.
Yeah.
I wish that I'm making, for those of you listening, I'm making a gesture like it was a piece of vinyl, but...
That's still cool, though. Like that's like a great jumping off point for Black Flag. It's like, you know, I had to go the other way. I had to get into it backwards.
Well, I would say that the first Black Flag song I heard was In My Head. Or the first record I heard was In My Head. And then like...
Where'd you hear that?
I had a CD of it, I guess, from like... There was a used CD store in Bloor West Village. And I don't remember what it was called. But
Erotica?
No, it was like at Bloor and Runnymede.
Oh, Bloor, wow, okay.
And
I don't know if I knew that.
I had some friends out there, and on the same day I bought a used copy of In My Head on CD and Ramones' Acid Eaters. And that same day I got a Black Flag polo shirt, but like the roach spray.
Okay, yeah.
But I was like, nobody will know. It's the same. And I had only heard In My Head, but I knew that Black Flag had a song called TV Party.
Yeah.
And I kept telling my friends I was really into Black Flag, and they were like, well, what's your favorite Black Flag song? And these are people who didn't know. I was like, TV Party? Because I definitely didn't like anything on In My Head then. I was just like, what is the big deal with this fucking band? They're terrible. And they're like, you like a band that has a song called Tea Party. Everybody was just like so punishing about it. But yeah, so that was like around this, that was post Sex Pistols, like finding anything. And so for the longest time, the only Ramones record I'd heard was Acid Eaters.
Well, that gives you, that's why yesterday you were demanding to hear some like
Too Tough to Die and Subterranean Jungle.
Yeah. So I guess like, where did you go though immediately after that Sex Pistols tape? You come home, you wash out that hair dye, you take that chain necklace off.
From there, I understood that there was, so like almost instantly with any music, but especially with punk, I was obsessed with the fact that I only knew a little bit about it. And I knew that people were punk, so there were kids at school who were into punk, and I was just this kind of like amorphous, sort of awkward person. And you know, I was like, I could talk to somebody about like Soundgarden and Nirvana to like the smallest extent, but I knew that there were like 10 or 15 people who were punks, and I was like, I gotta like know these people. And I had this one tape, and from there I was like, if this exists, something else exists. I gotta find it. And so I started getting into like pop punk, like 90s pop punk. So that was like the first way forward, and NoFX, Lagwagon, that kind of stuff.
Had you been playing yet?
I'd never played. I'd never played an instrument really, other than trumpet
and piano, right?
But I'd never played a guitar.
Because you come from like a very musical family. Like both your parents are musicians.
Yeah, both my parents are musicians, and I have like musical intuition, and like I can play I could play the trumpet, and I think I was in like the choir or something.
Did you know you could play guitar, or did you think you could, or no? Was there like no desire to?
There was a guitar at home, and the first song I learned to play guitar was "About a Girl" by Nirvana, because it's like a solid 2-chord song. It's like a good introduction to like what you should be doing in punk too.
Did you must have had to teach yourself?
Yeah, I never took a lesson, and for drums, that was like pretty self-taught too.
We'll get to that, Jonah.
We'll get to that.
We're jumping ahead. We're going to talk about your on-stage debut.
Yeah. Oh, right. Big debut. Well, I could like sort of play guitar, and I learned how to do it sort of by myself on some acoustic guitar at home, just from trying to play along with whatever CDs and stuff. After pop punk, there was a crucial store in Toronto that you and I both love called Full Blast Records, which is basically responsible for sending me on any pathway towards like the more finessed side of like knowing about punk music.
Had you been to any shows?
My first, I saw the Vandals opening for No Doubt.
Okay.
In like, that was sort of like even.
And didn't Civ play that too?
Yeah, Civ too.
Yeah. Did you see Civ? Were you there
I did
early
see
enough?
Civ, yeah. It was a great...
Did that register with you at that point or no?
I think I was just like, I didn't know what I was seeing, and I got actually really into the Vandals after that.
Yeah.
My timeline
They're
is...
a lot more like...
They're like sort of...
It's almost like ska punk in the sense that it's very like circusy punk.
Yeah, it's like totally funny.
Yeah, like it's very welcoming when you're a younger person. And
yeah, and they're like... Yeah, they're super engaging.
Yeah, the lyrics are very decipherable. You can...
And they're also like... They seem like they're really punk. They had that Live Fast Diarrhea thing. There's like a barfing Mohawk guy eating dog shit or whatever. I was like, oh, this is unbelievable. Like, wow, this is like truly the pinnacle. But
well, they did put a rat in a blender. The famous story, right?
God, what?
Isn't that famous story?
Wasn't that Frank Discussion who hit him? No, he just beat a rat to death on stage with a hammer.
Oh yeah, and then also he covered the whole stage one time in Dead Animals that he dug from Pet Cemetery. At the Gilman. That's how they got banned from the Gilman.
If you're going to get banned from the Gilman...
It's a bold move.
You might as well... As a performer, like, there's nothing you can do that's quite as intense as covering a stage in Dead Animals. Like, it's beyond performance. You really have to, like, believe in yourself.
I've done, like, some extreme stuff on stage, and people always come up and say, like, oh, you do some crazy stuff on stage. Yeah. There's, like, lines that I do not cross. And, like, dealing in dead animals or killing animals...
Of, like, yeah.
No, I didn't do it.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not into it either. There's like a certain kind of, showbiz panache.
There's a video of it.
Oh, God.
It's research. You know that research pranks video?
Yeah.
There's a segment about that with Frank Discussion interviewed.
I mean, the world is probably like a little bit more pleasurable not covered in animal corpses. So, but I appreciate that. I'm thinking about like, when you watch those old Target videos and the performance art is like a guy welding things together, or that band Eel that has like a power sander on stage and they send sparks everywhere. I mean, it's a good gesture and it's a performative gesture, but I'm actually kind of like shook hearing about this Dead Animals thing because I'm just imagining how dedicated you have to be to what you were about to do to stage that stunt. It's like beyond an action.
And it got written up in like the National Enquirer or the National Examiner, like one of those type magazines. It's like, this crazy punk band covers the stage in dead animal corpses. And they're the most punk band of all time.
See, but that's the kind of thing that when I was young, that's what I wanted to experience and see. Probably because I had like a totally calm upbringing. And, I was like, there's this whole world where people, like, I was sort of stunned when I saw people that to me looked really extreme and seemed chaotic and had no kind of stability in their personality I was just like, how do you even go to sleep at night? I just want to get to the point where I can be that this is going to sound cheesy, but kind of like that free. I always felt that there were so many things that I had to abide by, and some people just, it looked like they had just like rolled out of a garbage can, but they were still alive, and they still knew a ton about music, and they knew where things were happening. Everybody was so capable in that world, despite having this, otherwise crappy facade. But I thought that was really appealing, and so, but instead of chasing the image, I wanted to chase the music, and I thought that the way to be like that and the way to sort of feel free was to just know a lot about one thing or know a lot about something. And it kind of came in the form of music, because as soon as, and it's also, when you're trying to form an identity when you're a young person, music is a pretty common one, but it gives you an incredible amount of confidence to know something about the world that somebody else doesn't know something about, because you just become, it lends a certain capability, I felt, to be able to talk about Discharge in the record store, or to talk about Civ, or to know what some insignia meant or some symbol meant. And at that time too, which is, a lot of the people on your podcast are a lot older than me and have like lived through the birth of this place, when there's just, you really have to make your own way. For me, and to a certain extent you, we're living in this funny past tense version of the most of our chosen like interest, or how to put this better. All the artifacts of punk having happened were just starting to fade away when you and I were getting into it, and to me, I could find these little clues as to what music used to be like, or what punk culture or underground culture used to be like, and I just developed this really weird past tense relationship with punk, where I could find a little thing. You could find a used record, you could find an old out of date patch, or you could find a store that still sold spiky belts, but it was just like it was like a bondage shop. It wasn't.
It was just around the time, because I think that like your ascent, mine was a year or two earlier than you.
Yeah.
Because I'm a year or two older than you. But I think was kind of like that was punk's complete development. Like that's where it like went through its like whole stage of going back underground and then coming up again.
Yeah.
First through Nirvana and then ultimately through Green Day.
Yeah. Well, that's the amazing thing, is to sort of, because I felt that I was aware that punk existed, as though it had always existed, and you just take for granted that something was there, and I had no idea that there were these arcs. I just knew that there was old bands and new bands, and they were all the same. And actually, it's weird having got into this kind of music in a trough, in a way, because it was post-grunge, and it was kind of the tail end of the skate punk, pop punk, Fat Records thing, Green Day, Offspring being really huge. That was always in my peripheral vision. When I was into grunge, I looked like such a moron. Actually, I think punk probably saved my sense of self-image. I used to wear like polyester paisley 70s shirts, and I had long bleach blonde hair, and I wore a mushroom necklace, like a magic mushrooms necklace, and like pleated khaki old man pants, and like two big army boots. It was like a complete idiot.
Did you fuck with drugs in high school at all?
Not really.
Yeah.
I smoked weed and did hash, but I never.
It was an aesthetic thing.
Yeah. I was. Everybody was like,
choices.
do you do mushrooms? I was like, yeah. I got the necklace, don't I? Like, this is a total poser. But so I had like the really typical high school drug experience. I was like not adventurous in any way. I was just like, I'm gonna take this. Can I get your standard package of like youth experience? But then, at the same time, I was looking at all this other shit happen. That was like the nice thing, to be balanced, like have this really sort of lame high school, but then just disappear into this other world and see all this carnage and start to like understand the boundaries and limits of what you want to do. And then you go back to these sort of typical basic cultural teetotalers, and you're like, I know exactly where I can like but like I understand where I can ride in the various world.
But it's funny because you I think you took a very similar path than I did, where you kind of opt out of a lot of the high school social experience because you're going to shows.
Yeah.
and you're involved in this other stuff. Like, I think you were a little more involved in like some. I was way more of an outcast as far as no one liked me in school.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that I thought was funny was like there was a group of kids. I'm not going to say my brother was one of them, but maybe
he was.
But they got down with like the drugs and chose that.
I didn't
path.
mean to just like dime out your brother. Like, yeah, of course he was.
No, but he went down like another path. But you kind of, I guess, got a lot more into just like music stuff.
Well, yeah, that was I guess coming from a musical family as well. It was easy to think about music first, and I mean that's why I am thinking now even about that time, like being at this weird trough in the cultural like shift, because like punk couldn't have gotten much bigger and still kind of be underground. It was part of like underground mainstream culture, and then it went through this big trough, and by the time I was in bands or something, the sort of snowball started building again, and now we're at this point where punk is really pervasive, and not only in music culture or whatever arts culture, but corporations have distressed fonts and things which otherwise might have looked punk 15 years ago or 20 years ago. But yeah, focusing on music was kind of the most important thing. Dave Reeser was one of these kids in school that was punk. Dave Reeser was a guy that I went to high school with who unfortunately died in a train accident. He was getting out of... I thought he was like really cool and seemed to have this sort of freewheeling air about him and like new stuff and walk the walk, talk the talk. And he gave me this bag of... He's like, I'm getting out of punk. It sucks. I'm getting to hip-hop now.
That was the thing.
Yeah, that was the thing. You get out of punk,
rave or hip-hop.
Rave or hip-hop. Yeah, I think it was like... Everybody went rave and hip-hop, and then the sort of 6 people or whatever stayed punk. But he gave me this bag of CDs, and it was literally like inheriting another person's garbage. That's been kind of like, that was like the relationship to punk I think I had for a long time, where I was just like digging through the garbage of the world to find these sort of like slightly damaged but interesting things.
It's amazing because I know you don't get a chance to check out too many of these episodes, but Walter was on and tells this story about when he got into punk. He showed up at his school and this kid's like, hey, I'm getting out of punk. You want these records? Yeah. And give him a box of 7. It's just like an Urban Waste test press.
Oh my god!
It's like the most fire box, like Minor Threat records, like all this crazy ass shit. And it's like you got given like...
I got given like the Queers and like, assorted jelly beans. And I'm like, oh my god, this is blowing my mind. I like stuff like that. But that, yeah, again, it was just like, it was about the chase. It was always about the chase.
Absolutely. And like, you would have your years later in life of finding not the Urban Waste test press, but very few of us have ever found that type thing. No. But like, the equivalent of other rare records and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it wouldn't be as easy for us because, I think that's the time, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing
that's
too.
The equivalent. Like that was the dumping point at the time for
everyone. Yeah, you have to. I mean, it's sort of partly about who you're friends with. If your friends are really sort of turned on, then they'll have the best records. Somebody could have handed me a stack of, AMREP records. And I could have had a closer connection to hardcore, or somebody could have handed me a bunch of Guided by Voices records or something.
Yeah, no, I think though that like, if you were say 20 years earlier and in Queens, New York, as opposed to Toronto, Ontario, someone would have handed you that box of 7 inches
exactly.
as the equivalent.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that was like the assorted jelly beans, and that was the kind of the sound of the day.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's funny though, like you talk, like the gradation of taste too. It was like, okay, you get into the most obvious thing, and then you saturate yourself with whatever's around, and then you start to sort of decide what you actually like. Yeah. And that's sort of always the way you get into a different kind of music anyway. You sort of like blanket accept everything. But yeah, go ahead.
No. So from that No Doubt Vandal Civ show. Where did you go? What was your first local show?
My first local show was probably maybe an opera house, like a snow jam, pop punk kind of thing. Yeah. That's kind of a local. That doesn't quite count,
No, that counts. Like there were definitely like local bands on it. That would be your first probably exposure to local.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think of like the first small scale, like punk show I went to actually. And I'm trying to kind of coming up blank.
Any of those Elmo shows?
Oh yeah, Elmo. I went to see. What did I see? I saw like Ska Ska Oi at the Elmo Combo
Yep.
a lot, and that's the other thing is it's amazing how little a person can know better, you know. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, what's the punk scene like? There's ska, and apparently there's also ska, and there's also oi. So I'm like, I guess I should be like, maybe I should wear some suspenders. So I got into like kind of like, I was like, I think I'm a skinhead now, and I had a sharp patch, and everybody was like, what the, and like a newsy hat, and like I had these ridiculous boots, again too big. I remember I stole a pair of combat boots. They were like sitting. I like did a stakeout on this pair of combat boots. They were just always beside this locker at school, and I was like, oh, those are amazing. Those are the perfect boots. Like I can't afford my own boots. I really want those. I'm like, if they're there tomorrow, maybe I'll take them. And they were there, and I was like, oh, it's just stealing. I don't want to, like, what if this is like the janitor's boots or whatever? And then I like cased out these boots like every day for a month, and they were always there until finally I like looked over both shoulders, stayed a little late after school, and like grabbed them and went home. And they were so big. They were like cripplingly large. My feet were already crippled from like the foot binding behavior of Converse All-Stars. No, anyway. And then I had these combat boots on. They were for Andre the fucking Giant, and I was like dragging my steel-toed feet around, like tripping in pleated khakis from Goodwill, a fucking like, and I'm a short, fat teenager at this point, and probably like, you know, just the most eggy, awkward man, covered in zits and peach fuzz, and going to these shows and seeing like Spinecracker and Jersey, and then so it was a fairly profane existence in those early days of just sort of. Yeah.
No pun intended, literally. Because
literally none intended.
You weren't seeing any profanity.
No, I was not. And then
had you gone to like Who's Emma?
Well, my first time at Who's Emma was like shortly thereafter. So I had this sort of like pop punk world, and I guess I went to the Cathedral a bunch of times, and I saw like the Stiffs and You're a Girl and You Suck, and you know, all the local scenes, all the like local pop punky kind of bands at the time.
I wouldn't say that's all of them.
No, definitely not. I'm trying to I'm struggling to remember.
But I think also, you know what? I think the Zach Feldberg trio played that show at the Cathedral, which was
big.
My good friend Zach Feldberg.
Zach Feldberg is
one of his only few shows.
It's amazing how central some of these people have like become in your life. Like you are like, you're super tight with Zach, but like Zach, I bounced off Zach's world. Then I was just like, oh, I'll probably never see this person again. And then, you know, 20 years later, but I had to play trumpet in the school band or whatever at some like Christmas Carol service, and after that, our mutual acquaintance Jonathan Loft said, "Hey, do you want to come see a hardcore show?" And I was like, "Oh, like the only hardcore I'd seen was Straight Faced, or you know, I didn't really."
They played that Snow Jam.
Yeah.
So you read that one with No Fun at All.
No Fun at All. Straight Faced, Pride Bowl, and
that's a sick one.
That was a good one. It was lost on me too, because I remember just like saying like I'm gonna go in the pit and then just getting crushed and losing a shoe.
Did Ignite play that one too?
I think Ignite was on the flyer for sure, but I don't remember anything about it.
AFI maybe?
I don't know. I still have the flyer somewhere. Actually, it's a wicked flyer.
Yeah, you have a pretty good archive of this sort of stuff.
I lent them to Rick Smith, and he says he gave them back, but I can't remember. But yeah, there was another one. There was it was like one of those hardcore bands, kind of like weird mainstream metallic hardcore bands.
Oh, was it Misconduct?
Yeah, Misconduct maybe. That's the Swedish band, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
And maybe Sick of It? Would you have seen Sick of It All?
No, I never saw Sick of It. I was dying to see Sick of It All. I loved Sick of It All. There was like, I had, this kid Cam Davison gave me a mixtape that had Live in a World Full of Hate on one side and some live Avail record on the other side.
I think I made him that tape.
Really?
Yeah, because those are definitely my CDs.
Well, I listened to that like till it exploded. I thought that live Sick of It All set was like the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And I sort of started getting into like New York hardcore, which was also like a really pervasive thing at the time. Like those were the bands that lasted from like over like 2 or 3 turnover of hardcore and still were kind of doing their own thing. And they kept touring up here. It was like a stop. And so you were like, okay, yeah, I like Sick of It All. I like Murphy's Law. But Jonathan invited me to a hardcore show, and it was Darkest Hour at Who's Emma.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that was technically my first...
Submission Hold?
Yeah. Yes? Yeah. Did they play that show?
I feel like Darkest Hour played with Submission Hold later, but maybe that was the show that...
You know what? I did go to some shows that... Oh, I don't know.
But I think you might have played that show.
No, that was Board of Education.
Yeah, with Board of Education.
Terrible band. So I guess my timeline is wrong. So the Darkest Hour was it was like
maybe it was Darkest Hour before, or like a different show.
Something. And yeah, it was like I hadn't been to Kensington Market, like not in daylight hours, to like buy a chicken or something with my parents to that point. And I was like, oh my God, what is this place? And
it's a different place after dark at that point too.
Well, yeah, and then Who's Emma? I had never been in a place like Who's Emma, which is now I take for granted that something like that exists, and everybody I think perhaps takes for granted that a place like Who's Emma exists in their town, especially in the punk scene with like, you know, a sort of radical open space, safe space, etc. And I went down and I just watched this band, which I thought was pretty boring. But I was like, oh, hey, I guess I'm like, I think I go to hardcore shows now. And that same week I saw Madball and H2O at the El Macombo. And then, Madball at the El Macombo. And I tried to go see 25 to Life and H2O also at the El Macombo. But somebody didn't show up. But then, like, you know, I had like my world rocked. I went to this one Who's Emma show and I was like, okay, I've stumbled upon this other level. So I understood what the world was. I was like, the world is the cathedral, the El Macombo, or like the Big Bop, blah, 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 the El Macombo, and, you know, maybe the Bloor JCC and something else. And then there was this whole like tiny scene. The Who's Emma thing was like really small scale, and everybody was a real diehard and understood like deeply, deeply what was going on.
Had you met Mike at this point?
I'd never met Mike. I don't think I met Mike. I may have met him like shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
And that seeing Madball though, I'm trying to remember when I met Mike. All right, it'll come back to me. Okay. Seeing Madball was like explosive and crazy, and it was like a weird love at first sight moment with what was happening because. And it's strange because that's not really what, you know, Madball is like not where the focus of my taste went at all. But for having gone from just pop punk and sort of understanding hardcore as just like a slightly more aggressive version of pop punk, the shift to see what people were doing and to see the way the music was being played and by whom the music was being played, like it was a total turning point. It was nuts. And I first met Ewan, our friend Ewan, at that show because during the mosh part for Get Out, Ewan did this like terrifying gangly spider stage dive, landed right on my head. He was wearing a Madball like tank top and had this just like, you know,
it was probably a Madball basketball jersey, you know, in the era.
Yeah, he had like enough jewelry hanging off of his head. It's probably like the equivalent of his body weight at that point. And this like crazy man lands on me, and I was just, you know, I remember turning around and seeing people like moving in a way that I'd never seen before, and I was like, okay, I have to start to understand this now.
Yeah. So, what were the shows that you were kind of like, you know, at Who's Emma and that kind of stuff? Like when you started seeing, like, I guess it was like the Swarm, the first.
The Swarm was the first local band that I really, saw.
Yeah.
And bonded with. I can't remember the first time I saw them, but I knew that they were the band that everybody liked, and their shirts and their records, there was something special about them because, I don't know, the scene seemed small and there wasn't like a local band. I missed Left 4 Dead, which I found out about, you know, later. I was like, just barely missed them, so I wouldn't have been able to see them. But the Swarm was like the it band, and they were like a huge gateway into like being part of the local scene for me. And Chris is so welcoming. Yeah. And like, you know, he was this larger than life character because he's the singer of a popular band. It like doesn't get much more textbook than that, unfortunately. But when somebody like that is welcoming to a young person and not just sort of like patronizing, like, oh, hey man, like, how's it going? But also, you know, Chris just sort of used his whole personality with everybody, and it was like very cool to feel like you knew people.
Yeah, you're right. He's like the guy that I think more than anyone that is that person that kind of like ushered in our era.
Yeah.
You know, like he was the no one else was like, you know, and Ewan definitely,
Yeah,
you know,
Ewan
so
big
many
time.
people have been on this show saying, you know, but as far as someone in a band that you looked up to, that was also just normal.
Yeah, and treated you normal.
Yeah.
And that's the funny thing. It's so hard to be in a music scene, or at least it felt so hard to be in a music scene because everybody is kind of competing for the same 10 spots, you know, the same 10 spots beside the band. And it's actually, you know, like I was finding the hardcore scene, it was a way more competitive place than I thought. And it made me like feel competitive, but in like a really petty way.
Yeah.
Not like, I don't know. It was just, I remember feeling, I look back at it now as being petty, but I remember being like, oh, like, you know, fuck that guy. There's like this sort of like scene climbing. There was like this total
Status is everything.
Oh, this is all this microaggression.
Yeah.
It was crazy, but yeah, the Swarm, and then No Warning, or As We Once Were, were like the two big bands, and I think
Are you forgetting about Walls Around Us?
Walls Around Us.
No, you're not really forgetting about that.
Fighting Chance.
That was definitely the second band.
I never saw Walls Around
You
Us.
never saw? So
No.
you weren't at that 10-yard fight
No, I missed it.
show,
No,
and then there was Time Flies 10-yard fight, but then there was
I was at the Atari As We Once Were show.
Okay.
At the Elmo.
Yeah.
I was at the In My Eyes show.
at with the
Jason-
Swarm.
With the Swarm. That'd be Mark Schubert.
All right, now we're joined by Mark Schubert. Mark, how's it going?
Yo, what's up?
Music celeb,
It is true.
label mogul.
Greater personalities have rarely been in this room at the same time. It's
Yeah,
just
actually,
pretty fun.
I really do want to have you on the show. So this is like a future tease, I guess.
Sure,
But-
we'll figure something out.
Yeah, we'll figure something out for the future.
This is a preview.
Yeah, there's a preview. There's a cameo. It's like when you used to get a comic book and you'd find out, like, actually, the first appearance of Shadowhawk was in issue 397 of Bloodspot.
Panel 12.
Yeah, panel 12. You see him in the background. So this will be episode 104. People will know that Mark Schubert's in the background.
Deal.
After seeing that first week of gigs at the Elmo, I started seeing like the local bands, like As We Once Were, the Swarm. Yeah, the Swarm, In My Eyes, As We Once Were, at the JCC. The Swingin' Utters and No Warning when they first changed over to No Warning.
Yeah.
I went to a couple of Oakville Fests.
That As We Once Were show is one of my favorite. As We Once Were In My Eyes Swarm show.
It's probably like the most ultimate Damian show.
Have you watched the video of that ever?
There's a video.
There's an incredible video that Mike shot.
Oh my god.
Where there's like a scene where Jordan, no, it's not Jordan, it's like Ian Courtney just starts toe tapping in the middle of the floor repeatedly out of excitement. And like, there's some amazing mosh parts. I'm playing basketball.
Yeah, of course. You're like just in the background, like shooting hoops. Like I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I was already,
Fuck it.
like into Japanese hardcore wannabe.
You're like, this shit's okay.
Yeah, I'm like, I've got this bastard CD though that's blowing my mind.
Very mint
Yeah.
mint CD.
But that show, like, I guess where were you kind of getting into these bands? Because you were super, and I remember the Dropkick Murphys.
Oh yeah, I'm not avoiding talking about that, but that's what I was talking about. The like pervasive. Like,
They're not a bad band to be
no.
in.
I
Yeah.
know it because I feel like it's kind of a funny joke for you and I because like I'm like.
You had a jacket.
I had everything. I loved the Dropkick Murphys, and I'll go on record. And I haven't listened to it in forever, but I would totally still mess with that first
yeah.
LP. But to me, there was like, okay, so there was the pop punk, there was like the fast skate punk thing, and then there was there was ska or whatever, and like it briefly flirted with ska because it was like around. But then the Dropkick Murphys, I got that Hellcat.
You were in a
CD.
ska band, right? Briefly.
No,
Were you
never.
You were never in
Johnny New York and the Stink Bomb.
Yeah, Johnny New York.
Like the best band ever. We tried to our friend Jonathan, who was like, he knew stuff. His dad was from New York, and he was like going to St. Mark's Place and going to shows there, and he was like pals with this guy called Chrysoplan, who used to be in the band Discipline, and he had a band called Under the Gun, and Johnny like folded us in.
What's his band Discipline like? Was that like a hardcore?
It was like a New York hardcore, like kind of like.
Have you ever heard them?
I did hear it. They had a CD or something. It's kind of I don't remember. It's
Like 90s New York
like 90s
hardcore?
New York hardcore.
Oh,
but
sick.
that guy Chris is like the early Jonathan's friend Chris. His scene is like the very late 80s, early 90s, like probably Sheer Terror.
Oh, sick.
Like
Dark Side NYC.
Yeah, like that kind of like before it really shifted over, it was still like the 80s hangover and everybody was still doing cool shit. And I think that guy, he was really cool and he was really nice to us actually. And now that you mentioned this fake band, Johnny New York and the Stink Bombs, say that again.
That might be the worst band name
so dumb.
ever brought up.
Can you see? Yeah. Oh, it's terrible. I wish. Oh man, it would be great to have had. There was this notebook. So my first band, the first time I played, I'll just gloss this over quickly. The first band I played in, I joined my friend Jesse's band in high school called BSE. And they were like a kind of pop punk band, and they played with the Misfits.
They opened
played
for the Misfits at the infamous Nazi Misfits show.
Yeah, the most Nazi Misfit show of all time. Everybody was just like,
Nazis showed up at a show in Toronto that I can really remember.
Oh, man.
In force after sort of like I guess they were kind of like the BFGs kind of wiped them out.
Yeah.
In Toronto. And which has come up on the show before. Stephen McBean talks about how they were chased across Canada by the BFGs.
That's crazy.
But yes, but that show, they did show up. They were like pelting this band of little kids.
Yeah, I remember him being like, there was bottles everywhere. It was crazy.
It was insane.
But Jesse was totally instrumental in getting me into music and getting me into the punk scene because he really knew. He had this band, and his uncle was in like a AC/DC cover band in the 80s, and he was like this great guitar player, and he had some band his band was called Blade Runner, and there's this like killer video of them, and they just look like fucking Twisted Sister, and they're playing on this. It looks like a giant stage, and I can't tell if it's a gig or if it's like a promo video, or what. And then and so. James, Jesse's uncle, was like trying to teach us about gear and tone, and we're like, no, like, haven't you ever heard Drop Dead? This is amazing. He's like, this sounds like a fucking vacuum cleaner, and you have to play it backwards, and it's on vinyl. Like, you're an idiot. We're like, no.
Oh yeah, because you had to play that record backwards.
Yeah, you had to play it from the inside out. But we had this notebook of band names. So BSE was one thing, but that was like their like young person pop punk band, and then. I joined and they wanted to be a little bit more hardcore, more like New York hardcore. Yeah. The style of the day.
Well, that was H2O.
H2O, yeah.
H2O is like a band that, once again, comes up a lot because they are so key in that bridge for people. They
brought everybody in because they're like, they're like the vestigial tale of all the stuff that everybody was... We were like, okay, we got to know about New York hardcore because New York hardcore is real. Like, okay, buy this Warzone. Like, I had that like the like re-recording of the first Warzone 7-inch, which was a pretty cool thing to hear by them actually. And then like I remember getting the Cheaters and the Cheated by Cause for Alarm when I was still in high school and being like, this is the craziest guitar playing I've ever heard. Meanwhile, like in my very near future, I would be able to get a copy of Kill 'Em All and be like, I see where you're sort of like taking some of this from. But
was that like from Full Blast? You're getting those records?
Yeah, so Full Blast Records was the place for I think that like if you're talking about subculture music history in Toronto from like the 90s for like our little patch, you got to talk about Full Blast because Luann is like she's one of the most generous people in the world and so kind and so inclusive and also has really great taste in music.
Incredible taste, yeah.
And she lived the hardcore scene from the early mid-'80s through like all the changes that Toronto would have done, and she was going to the States and she did the great Tunga Tunga zine and was doing these trades with people.
And had a column in MRR too for a brief period, right?
So like you're talking about a person that at that point knows everything you want to know.
Yeah.
And she just kind of, she would humor us because I'd be going like, oh yeah, like, can I get this Killing Time record? Or like, I want to get this, do you have Token Entry? Actually, I bought the first hardcore LP I ever bought was Jaybird by Token Entry.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Which I got from Rotate This.
Okay, yeah. Rotate's the other one that you have to bring up, but like, Rotate lived the gimmick so much about an indie store that wasn't gonna be nice to you.
Yeah, they were just like, we hate you.
Except for Chris Harper.
Yeah, Chris Harper, also wonderful ambassador. He was just like, what are you into? I'm like, hardcore, sir. He's like, you like Concrete Socks? He's obsessed with Concrete Socks. And so like, I knew about concrete socks before I knew about discharge or whatever.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? I was like, "Do you have any concrete socks, Luann?" She's like, "No, go away."
Yeah, no, he is definitely he was definitely really cool. But like, unlike Full Blast, they didn't really carry those indie hardcore
No, it was
labels.
a pure punk store.
Yeah, Full Blast was a punk store, and like also the people she staffed that store with, be it like Allison Baker having a couple shifts that she worked there,
Yeah.
or like Glenn or
Simon,
Harvey,
yeah.
and like these people were
Yeah, these people knew music.
Conduits, yeah.
and like Simon, who listens to this podcast and he knows very well he can be a very typical record store
Yes,
kind
he
of
can.
guy, and he's so cynical and he's so like sharp tongued. And it's like, it's just like, it's like a steak in a Shark
you'd be
Tank when like
nasty.
some idiotic kid in a school uniform, like, hi, do you have like the Blink-182 new CD? So I was just like, oh yeah, here we go, baby. Like you can hear his mental knuckles cracking. But actually, the guy turned me on to a ton of great music.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I cannot
Glenn,
overstate that enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And
so much like I think that the three of them are people like that was really what schooled me in a deeper way about knowing about music.
yeah, and this is the thing, like you sort of slightly weep for the lack of something like that, and hopefully, and I'm sure it does still exist,
Yeah.
but it feels like, and this is like the really typical older person thing to say, and I don't know, like these sort of stalwart people that were into punk in the 80s, and then like they lived through, they had their own transition probably into like garage or indie rock or like post whatever,
Or Japanese
or
hardcore
Japanese
in the case
hardcore.
of Simon,
Yeah. And they get over it, but they just know tons about music at the most crucial time. And I think that it's really easy to just get information about music elsewhere now. And well, of course, I was thinking we were just in Richmond, Virginia, and we went into Vinyl Conflict. And like if Bobby was working, like there's a guy that knows lots about music too, and he can tell you, and he's generous. Ryan Tong at Faith Void, he's generous. He'll give you a lot of information, but you can always go somewhere else if you don't know. And I really, like, it's so crucial. Like I feel like I relied so heavily on them to understand something. And one of like the big things for my taste. So like we've been talking about taste, and I was like really railroaded into this like New York metallic hardcore thing, and I was really into Scarhead, and I was really into the Dropkick Murphys, and I was really into Sheer Terror, and what was it? 25 to Life, Love 25 to Life, Madball,
Yeah.
all the like typical bands.
Not really typical.
Well,
but I think
yeah.
it's typical if you're like into New York hardcore at that time period. But I think that's like so reflective of the fact that Johnny was going down there constantly and getting access to like all this culture that he knew the people.
Yeah, he was hanging out with those people. Again, and the like late 90s Agnostic Front record.
Yeah.
I remember getting that and being like, yeah, I like this pretty good. It's okay, but like, I don't understand where this angle of hardcore is coming from. And then Martin from Career Suicide was like, oh, he had a combat copy of Victim in Pain, and he's like, you want to hear what Agnostic Front really sounds like? I'm like, what do you mean? I mean, I have the CD. And he's like, no, this is their second record from like 1984. I'm like, they're that old? And he puts on Victim in Pain, and I just started laughing because I couldn't believe kind of how good it was. But and the same thing, these epiphany moments, like Full Blast again, I had heard of the band Infest, and I had special ordered a copy of the Devoid of Faith Voorhees split 12-inch.
Yeah.
And Luann, I still have it, and it's got my name on it, and I still have a poster somewhere that she like got into the shop for some reason and gave to me. And I was like, I heard about this band Infest. Do you have that? And she's like, I'll get it in for you too. And so she ordered in like a copy of like a repress, whatever press of the Infest thing was going around.
Yeah.
And that was another one where I put it on, and it was, when you hear people talking about the Ramones, and they're like, yeah, we like went over, my friends came over, and we like smoked weed, and we put the Ramones on, and we just laughed our heads off because we couldn't believe it. I got this Infest record back, and I invited my bandmates Jesse and James over. I was like, guys, I got this Infest record. They're like, oh, we've never heard Infest. I'm like, we got to listen to it together. So we all sat down in front of my record player in my room at my dad's house and put this thing on. We were like laughing our asses off for the entire like 12 minutes of that record. We were just like, this is the most fucking insane thing we've ever heard. Listen to his voice. It's terrible. Listen to the recording. It's terrible. Look at the artwork. It's awful. And then it got to the end and we was like, put it on again. And then we listened to it like 50 times. And it was like another weird like turning moment.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
I guess that's like, were you into Charles Bronson? Because that's the other thing that's a
big question.
Wait, I think you found a way to dance over didn't you have, what was your first band that played on stage?
Oh yeah, so BSE was the first time I ever played
Yeah.
on stage, and we did a set of Rancid, Dropkick Murphys, and something else covers. Here's the circumstance. So Damian and I both went to the same high school, and it's just like super like, you know, prim and proper kind of place, and it was an all boys school, and so they wanted to do something nice for the student body, and the German department, which was one guy, somehow through the embassy or the Goethe Institute, had brought this band called Die Sterne. He corralled them into taking an off day from their, you know, big press tour of, you know, German language speaking like bad pop rock to come and play
Like,
a
now
boys
that you're
fucking
a
high
band,
school. Yeah.
now that you're a band, you know that this band was working like the biggest government scam ever. Like,
100%. Can you imagine the amount of government money that these people had coming into their...
holy shit.
Going right in the gas tank of those planes, going right into the guitar strings.
Like, I don't think, like, how does a band do a tour and not play a real show?
Yeah, and not like, did the school pay for it? Like, there's no way. But the school paid for this huge outdoor stage and lights thing, like a real stage. And I bought a guitar. I had like, my dad had an electric guitar kicking around, or there was one in the house, and it was like a cheesy Telecaster. But I'd like saved up some money, and I got this red for this show because I was so excited. Got this red knockoff Rickenbacker El Degas Rocker guitar.
The Tim Armstrong.
It was a little bit Tim Armstrong. It was like, it's like Beatles, Tim Armstrong. And this thing sounded terrible. It was like, it wouldn't stop feeding back. You couldn't turn it off. The toggle switch kept going, and the strings were so close together. So it's supposed to be like a Rickenbacker, but it's, you know, it's just like put together by like somebody probably like scratching their head in the basement. Just like some. They're like, that's why the frets are so close together. And I'm playing this thing and it sucks. But I bleached my hair for the show. I was not aware of so in my Oi stage, one of the first punk records I ever got two pieces of vinyl from Full Blast was the Son of Oi compilation.
Yeah.
So I would have been like 14, 15 years old, and I was like, I just got to look like these guys. And there's a picture on the back of like the Cockney Rejects going like this, that famous picture of Stinky Turner. And I was like, oh, God, I'm going to do a lot of that, whatever that means. I'm like, how does he get his fingers to do that? I was like putting a tennis ball in between my fingers so that they would go wider. You know, I'm just like, God, whatever's going to get the job done is going to get the job done. And so there's this picture of me and Jesse, and it's amazing because it is a time capsule beyond time capsule. He's got wraparound Oakley shades and bleached blonde hair. I think I'm still wearing my mushroom necklace. I got a black hooded school sweater on, and I'm doing like two fingers like this. It was just actually the best day ever. It was so fun. I was like addicted to performing after that. I got up there, couldn't hear a thing, played terribly. Didn't know anything about playing, but I was awesome. That was my first show.
So where did BSE go after that?
BSE went to the basement. We had a bit of a revamp.
Yeah.
So armed with... Okay, so here's the interesting thing is that we were armed...
So you guys also... This is when the time you started hooked up with Martin.
Well,
and Martin, in high school...
He was a crazy man.
Was an odd cat.
Yeah.
He was like...
Martin is like my best friend, he's so sturdy.
He's matured into something so different.
He's like locked tight, but back then I feel like he was totally like nuts. I thought of him and I thought like anything can happen if I'm going to hang out with this guy.
Well, I remember when I first started seeing him around and he was like the guy with the super long Kurt Cobain-esque hair.
Bad Religion patch.
Yeah, well, I think it was before he had the Bad Religion patch where he was just like, and it was like, years later, that would be the guy that would be sort of just stereotyped as like the one that you have to worry about in the class.
Oh yeah, typical like teacher railroaded Martin into being like, oh yeah, he's a bad kid.
Yeah.
But oh man, yeah. Well, Martin too was into like Victory Records stuff then as well, and he was into
those Victory samplers were.
Yeah, he had a really cool Victory Records windbreaker actually, and Trial. Remember the show? He did a trial show.
He did the trial show?
He did the trial show, I think.
No. John Gerson did the trial show.
The one at the downstairs at the Big Bop?
Yeah, that was John Gerson. And
I thought Martin had something to do with it.
No, I think it was Gerson, and I think it was like and Adam Gill maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a cool show. I remember that because it was like...
I was away. That's when I moved away.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that trial show was great, actually. I got really into trial. And then
I saw trial, and they were fantastic at the time. I remember seeing them in...
that record, Is This Our Lives or whatever, I was like, it's so heavy.
Is that the one on Crime Thing?
No, it's the one before that's on Crime Thing. Well, maybe This Our Lives is on Crime Thing.
No, it was the one on Crime Thing. I saw him at the Gilman.
Oh, nice.
And it was...
Big move.
Yeah, it was... Well, Mom was a flight attendant, so I could fly standby.
Giddy up. See, that's what I'm saying. You get these little ins to the culture. When you go somewhere else that's not... Because Toronto is like great and everything, but it's small, it's isolated, it's conservative. Bands didn't come here the same way.
They changed the rule. At one point, you could bring in bands for like... I think it was like $50. You could bring in like 10 bands on it.
Yeah.
And then it became something like $500 per band.
Oh, man.
To bring them across the border. Yeah. And it just became impossible to do those big package tours.
Yeah.
In the same way, so.
But then if you go somewhere else, like, and the States is so huge and there's so many bands, then now, always, like, you're just bound to see something cool. And then you bring it back, you kind of bring the energy back here. Sometimes you just hold it so close to you and you don't let it go, but other times one can put it out in the world,
Yeah.
But yeah, what were we talking about? Something funny.
We're talking about your band transitioning.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you met with Martin.
Yeah, well, Martin, at that time, everybody's tastes were kind of like, I was becoming really good friends with Martin, and Jesse was and James were still really into like what they were into. Martin got me into Charles Bronson. He lent me his copy of the Charles Bronson 12-inch, and again, this is like one of those things where I kind of just like, I hadn't heard anything like it before, and I thought it was so fast and so tight, and I was really attracted to, and of course you know this, like the kind of humor aspect. I'm like a pretty basic guy sometimes, and I just like dumb comedy, and also like I have like a great deal of trouble trying to put that sort of shim in front of my personality that other people do, where you can have like your creative idea. I'm just like, come on, there's got to be a banana peel in there somewhere. So I was like, oh, this is great. This band's funny and they sound crazy, and I got super into Charles Bronson. I thought like, oh, this is my band. This is the band that I want. It sounded kind of like. They kept name-checking 80s. I was getting really into early 80s hardcore at this point. It was like 1999 or whatever. Getting really into early 80s hardcore, and I got that CD that Craig Caron did of the Neos EP. Yeah. So I was getting really into the Neos. I bought a copy of Back from Samoa, and I had the Faith Void split. And like, a few records here and there that I started to like really understand. And then Charles Bronson was like name checking all these bands. And so I was like, this is good. This is great. I'm going to like know something, and this band's cool. And I just missed them. So I have to like really get everything I can. And then so Martin and I did this power violence band together, which is like, if you think about what people consider power violence today, it's like tight as hell, influenced by like killer death metal. Everybody can play. There's mosh parts. It's like they've made this perfect amalgamation of Crossed Out and Beharit and Neanderthal, and I don't know, like and Killing Time. But in my mind, power violence was just like do whatever you want. Yeah. So we had this shitty band called Board of Education.
Yeah,
it was fucking
so
brutal.
Bad.
It was so dumb. It was like I had a blast doing it. Obviously, it was like truly just acting like an idiot. And we would make these live CDs, and we played shows and did dumb stuff. There were skits. Yeah.
Remember the raver one, like.
Oh hey, we want to go to the show.
No, we want to go to the rave, Dad.
No, you can't. But I want to. Fuck you, son.
Yeah. You played the dad in that skit, if I remember correctly.
Really up my alley.
And the CDs would come with like razor blades in there, or your penises drawn on them.
Well, we were getting really into Gigi Allen, and we were like, we got to have this like sleazy aspect to it, and so we Martin and I got drunk and we traced the outlines of our penises on these CDRs, and then we put razor blades in the CDs to like, I don't know why we did that, because we're like, it'll ruin the CD or like it'll fuck with someone. We played Board of Education played a show at Who's Emma with Closet Monster, and the drummer of Closet Monster, he was like a machinist or something, like solid like blue collar guy, works with his hands, and he's like, I really dug your stuff, man. Can I get a CD? So he buys a CD, puts it in his bag, and forgets about it. The fucking razor blade falls out, and he reaches into his bag to get some shit for work, and like slices his arm open, nearly like severs a fucking vein. The next time I saw him, he's like, I'm not happy with you. I'm like, what? And he's like, your fucking dumb CD had this razor blade in it, and it cut me. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Anyway, so Board of Education, but it was, so a success, I guess. And that point too, that was a funny thing. So BSE became Scare Tactic, and we made this CD that was like.
Oh, so Board of Education exists? No,
Board of Education.
You're leaving out As One.
Oh yeah. So no, right. So BSE became As One, and then we were this like sort of Unity style, moshy New York hardcore, Warzone influenced kind of thing. And Strife. We remember we went into the studio that Jesse's uncle hooked up, and the guy's like, "What do you want to sound like?" And we just gave him In This Defiance or whatever by Strife. We're like this. He's like, "No problem." And so that was that, and Jesse was straight edge, and he was getting into like. He was like starting to like use his head. He was writing letters to the guy from Trial. They were talking, and it's like end of high school. You're starting to think you're smart, and like so the lyrics were like progressively straight edge, but he didn't. I wasn't straight edge, and maybe it was like a kind gesture to me to not have this like to not be exclusive or whatever.
Well, it was like straight edge in your face.
What a fucking waste. Take your fucking bullshit and get out of this place. X's on your hand. Take a fucking stand. Like. Whatever it was, it's a killer high school straight edge lyrics, and everybody was like,
and Tattoo Flash on the cover.
Oh yeah, oh no, yeah, big time Tattoo Flash. That was like Tattoo Flash. I had like Elvis hair. Jesse was like X'd up like crazy. We took like photos in the alleyway behind where the Transac is, behind the green room, because it was like sick graph. Oh man. I mean, this is like, and then it was shortly after Columbine too, and he had this weird sort of lamentation for the victims of the school shooting called "Caught You in My Crosshairs," and it was like, we're really saying something here. But then shortly thereafter, like the sort of musical sound and the kind of like angle, the like really serious angle, not the Scare Tactic. So that was As One, and then.
You were also at the same time in Board of Education, which is the silliest.
It's like the dumbest band.
The complete opposite of this super earnest.
Yeah.
Also, not as great as some of the other musical achievements in your life band.
No, I remember. I mean, I kind of learned how to play drums because of Board of Education, because we used to cover the song "Girl Problems" by SOA, and I just learned how to play drums for that.
So you drummed it? You drummed it?
Everybody did everything. It was just It's not.
It was improvised lyrics.
Board of Education made Psycho Sin sound like Mahler or whatever. It was so horrible and great. But yeah, so at the same time as this bad band, we've got As One, which is like sort of somber, straight edge band. We were trying to be on the scene. That's around the time.
Trying to be the Swarm too. The Swarm was such a big influence.
Huge influence. Yeah, there was this. That's good. Thank God you're here, because I would have just gone off the rails. But you're right. The Swarm was heavily influencing As One, and then because we were getting into the local hardcore scene, we were buying more records. Especially me at this point. I'm like I got big turning point in my musical life. Steve Perry played me This Is Boston, Not LA. Mm-hmm. And so I heard that, and then I heard the Jerry's Kids LP and the FUs, and I was just like, oh my God, this is what I want to sound like. And at the same time, I'm like dragging this sort of like metal hardcore thing with me, and I was also, because through Charles Bronson, I decided to get into power violence, but like I kind of like found my way to the good stuff pretty quickly. I was really into Crossed Out.
Were you into Godzilla at all? Were you seeing Gojira?
That was like the early days. Yeah. Gojira was the first bass player of Career Suicide, was in this very also power violence band called Gojira, and
I think we referred to it as poser violence.
Poser violence.
That's what Simon Harvey used to call it.
Ouch. But they were influenced by like Spaz, and so like Spaz, Crossed Out, No Comment. Steve, same day I heard Boston, Not LA in high school, I also heard Downsided by No Comment.
Yeah.
So I'm like, my brain is getting like rattled in three directions, and that's kind of where I was like, okay, and I also was really into AOD. which we can't skip. I was hugely into AOD because
they
were like, that was the 80, that was like this early 80s sound that it was like fast and simple, and I just liked the way it sounded, and they were like kind of shitty and funny.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so great, and so I got really into AOD. And then people like you and Mike used to bust my balls about liking AOD because it was so silly and dumb, and you guys clearly had better task back then.
No, it wasn't. AOD's awesome. Wacky Hijinks is incredible.
No, it's great, and I was just like, oh, fuck these guys for hating on this record, and it made me like it even more. And I would try and find these AOD riffs. I was like, you see, the Cro-Mags ripped off AOD here. Like, I got the AOD demo, and there's some song that sounds exactly like Survival of the Streets. And I guarantee you there's like a kind of taste crossover, but, we're not going to like put the historical stance saying that the Cro-Mags ripped off AOD. But
because I'm sure Harley would produce a demo that was from 81.
Yeah, exactly. Like, here's my first band from 1975.
Yeah.
It's like exactly the Cro-Mags LP.
Yeah.
That shit's just been like a finished product inside Harley's brain, like since he was born.
Yeah, it's in this book. If you listen to the book that
the new book
Allen Ginsberg put out.
Oh right, yeah, the poetry
back
book,
back then.
Wild Young Savage or whatever.
The Cro-Mags already ripped into that DNA.
But yeah, then so like, As One became Scare Tactic, and Scare Tactic was like darker, but and a little bit more contemporary and a little bit more informed. So I was listening to like Jerry's Kids and Crossed Out and No Comment and like whatever else, Charles Bronson.
You guys made that transition as One because the demo came out as One.
Yeah, so the demo was 1999, and the demo was As One, and it was like it had a reference to Sons of Ishmael in it, and it had I like, because I was like I was saying before, you just sort of collect all this information, and you don't know. I was just sort of not confident enough to like make my own thing, so I thought I had to incorporate all these other references to things that I knew about, so that people knew that I was coming from the right place. It's like a typical or maybe not typical, but it's very insecure behavior. Mm-hmm. So the As One demo had a reference to Sons of Ishmael in the title. For the band photos, I had the pictures of the members of Battalion of Saints, and there was like an image from the Born Against patriotic hymns in there, and there was like a pastiche of like whatever I was into. And that was As One, and then we thought like, oh, it's not really the same band, and As One's just sort of like cheesy.
And also you started getting underground hype for that demo in Toronto.
Yeah, people liked it. Okay, well I'll finish that thought. So people did like the As One demo, and because it sort of it got some. I think it got reviewed in Maximum because of Steve Perry.
Well, I remember Mike putting it on too.
Oh really?
In a big way.
See, this is cool too about Mike, and like this is around that time is when I first started to experience Mike, and like I knew him on the scene, and his sort of outward personality was similar now. He's like kind of pretty introverted, and a hard nut to crack, and so it's like I'm young and I'm like still trying to fit in, and so I like. And he does shows. I knew that he did all the gigs with him. And actually, for as standoffish as he could be, he totally extended the welcoming. Like, put us on a couple shows, even though he probably thought we were lame asses. But like, put us on gigs, and all of a sudden we were part of the local scene. It felt amazing. And the Scare Tactic demo or whatever, he wanted to like include it in like a Toronto comp. He sort of saw something that was going on. And yeah, it was quite cool. So and so As One became Scare Tactic, and then around the same time, Career Suicide in its incarnation, which is so.
We can leave it there for today because we got to run to the studio now.
Yeah, we're
going to leave it there because I want to get into the fact that you and Martin stole Career Suicide.
Yeah, it was
not your band.
Straight up coup d'état.
It is not your band. It is stolen. You
Part
borged
2,
it.
baby.
You borged it.
I borged it.
All right, Jonah. Well, thank you so much for doing this, buddy.
My pleasure, Damian. Thank you.
All right, Jonah. Here we are.
We're back.
We're back. We've lost a Schubert.
We don't have our audience, our like sort of fact-checking enthusiastic audience like we had last time, and we're not around the kitchen table, but we are around our. This is the other place we meet most frequently.
This is probably the place we spend the most time together.
That's right.
In a hotel room.
Witching hour, 1:39 a.m. Just minutes past 1:38 a.m.
Or whatever time you happen to be listening to us.
Yeah, but it's relevant because I think I'm having to chase Doyle, right? All right, is this episode coming after the one with
This
Doyle?
is, yeah, we are the
So
the
we
next
should
episode.
probably mention some kind of like Misfits.
We don't have to reference any
Okay.
Misfits stuff. Don't worry, buddy. They all exist in their own universe.
Okay, cool.
You don't have to make reference to anyone else.
Okay.
People are just listening to my blown out voice. But no, I wanted to make sure we got you back on because we left
I know we
at just the beginning of the Jonah ascent.
Okay.
Right? We left at Scare Tactic.
Oh, right. So yeah, Scare Tactic was my first real band. It wasn't a band that I had. It became a band out of something that I had joined into, but that was the first time that I had really had a chance to write a song for a group that, I don't know, was organized and together and sort of had this notion of itself. So yeah.
And it's funny when you think about it, but like technically, Scare Tactic kickstarted the Toronto wave that all of us rode.
Chronologically, yes.
Yeah, chronologically.
Chronologically, yeah. It was
I think it predates that No Warning 7-inch too.
It does. It was the demo that became the 7-inch. The demo was 1999 when it came out, and then the 7-inch was like 2000. But I think that I probably back then I thought about that chronology and thought it was very important that came out first. But I think actually in retrospect it's interesting because even though it did come out at the time, Scare Tactic was not nearly as embedded as any of the other bands that were sort of on the scene. So it made more sense that like the Torchbearers were the No Warning, As We Once Were, and then eventually Fucked Up and stuff like that. But Scare Tactic was like in the milieu.
Yeah, because I think like, you had, James wasn't really involved in anything else, but you and Jesse were kind of like the nexus for Career Suicide when you would scab into Career Suicide. I think Jesse wasn't he in Career Suicide first?
Oh, I don't know if... No, he was in Fuck Jonah first.
Okay, well, we're not even going to get there. We got to deal with Scare Tactic.
Jesse was in Career Suicide for many years, though.
Yeah.
And...
but like you guys were, I know what you're saying, like it didn't... Like it was almost like you guys were the band of the other scene. There was that No Warning scene.
Yeah.
And then there was like the Equalize and Distort scene.
Yeah, well, I like to think definitely that we were like a positive outsider in the sense that like every scene has its stalwart people and we were totally newcomers and so we just represented a slightly different angle on it. And yeah, I guess, as young people, we were... Our sort of immediate peers ended up being this sort of the other side of the people that knew everybody. It was like we got involved with the radio show Equalizing Distort, which was Sunday nights, and it still goes on to this day. And Steve is, I can't tell if he's like a masochist or a saint for putting himself through like all of the minutia of every possible band from Des Moines to Kuala Lumpur. But
yeah.
It's a labor of love, obviously. And so, I mean, it felt quite cool to be involved in this thing that was like, that was on a radio and interested in bands from around the world. And so, yeah, we were learning a lot. And yeah,
C. Perry is also someone else that deserves like, a ton of credit for everything he does to this day in music. But also, I think like, once again, that whole scene of bands that started, No Warning, Fucked Up, Career Suicide, Brutal Nights, like Adversary. There was a bunch of other bands that were also lumped in there too.
Yeah.
But it was all like Equalize and Distort was like a really early place that a lot of bands could do live sessions.
Yeah.
Haymaker even did one there.
Yep, absolutely. It's funny too because I feel like at that point there wasn't really the sort of community center vibe that there is now and in recent years. I feel like Full Blast Records, when that was around, was a huge sort of center for people to go to, and then there was also Peddler and sort of what was that other, and Rotate, but like there wasn't like a punk record store. I feel like at that era, and for some reason Steve reached out to everybody and had them on his show, and it was a place to focus some energy, certainly.
Well, that was almost like a point before everything exploded.
Yeah.
Where it really was small.
Oh yeah.
Like there was like a major scene contraction throughout the late 90s. So by the time early 2000s came around,
yeah,
it was like 100 people.
Yeah, and especially after Who's Emma disappeared or went shut down. Who's Emma was an anarchist free bookstore with a venue in the basement, and when that went away, I feel like people really lost something that they could rely on, and there wasn't a venue anymore. There was this sort of this intangible thing in the air, and there were a lot of improvised spaces in town, like
Kites, and then the Anarchist Free Space, but then you just had to work in these weird other spaces like Q Bar,
Yeah.
Clinton's, like all these sort of
Anya's.
like Anya's was great actually. That there should be like a whole portion of this dedicated to this Middle Eastern restaurant that somehow got suckered into doing hardcore shows, and they did everything from like.
Well, they always loved us when we did our shows, but then there were other kids that would come in and do those kind of like more mosh metal-y shows and trash the place. And it's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
why would you fuck up one of the few places we can do this?
Yeah, it's just not you. It's not worth the grandstanding to like take away. I mean, everything is so hard fought in this city. Like, you think of Toronto back then, and it feels way more wide open. Like you could find a little nook or cranny to do your gig in, and it wasn't a big deal. There wasn't anything that anybody had to latch onto. Everybody was still so unsuspecting. And now real estate is so high, everything is redeveloped or gentrified or whatever. But like, it was impossible to find a space back then too. You know, maybe even more difficult.
Yeah. No, I don't know.
I mean, no. Well, whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
I think people are more, and I don't think this has anything to do with necessarily just the bands kind of doing well from our city, but like, I think people are more receptive to it. Clubs and bars are more receptive to having like a punk band play or like a hardcore band.
Well, that's the interesting thing about that era that we were in, is it feels like it was really the last breath of a changing city. Mm-hmm. And it's I find it kind of, I mean, it's a little egotistical to imagine that our generation of bands, that 5 to 10 years or whatever it was somehow representative of like an older and completely different world. But in some ways, I can't imagine it being the same. Like, the city is just so inextricably different now, and in the past 3 years even, than it was in the year 2000. I think it has a huge effect on the way bands formed and the way bands played and the kinds of decisions they would make. I mean, again, like, it's impossible for me to speak from a position of really the like sort of unknown aspects of youth, but it kind of felt like a slightly more hostile place. Yeah. And that's I'm not trying to say like, back in the day, you couldn't walk down the street without getting hit with like a baseball bat or whatever, but it's like, hostile is a much more widely applicable word.
Yeah, I think hostile, not necessarily physical, but like there was definitely like it wasn't like the indie rock scene was necessarily openly embracing punk till we kind of
definitely
made it
not.
happen.
Definitely felt like it was at odds.
And now the indie rock scene almost exists around the hardcore scene.
Yeah, or at least like there's lots of the same records being talked about.
Yeah,
but the hardcore scene now seems to be way more comfortable talking about other kinds of music.
Yep.
I mean, everybody probably listened to everything under the sun.
Yeah, like,
but you wouldn't like say, if you were if Fucked Up wouldn't have name checked like Sonic Youth or Big Black or something, or like the Raincoats necessarily when we were starting.
I think we did.
I guess we did,
because it was all post breakout.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, I think we were the perfect example of like that moment when all this hardcore information and punk information hit the internet.
Yeah.
And I don't just say us as in Fucked Up. I mean, like, our scene, like all those kids in Boston, like the Painkiller Records kids, and like people on the West Coast too, and people all over just started like fiending for this information, and that was like the birth of this sort of punk rock otaku culture.
I feel, although I could be wrong, but it sort of seems like that the fiending for the information is dissipating, and I think that's kind of a good thing, actually. I spent so much time fixating on digging as much as, and still do, digging up as much possible information, relic, history, fossil, whatever, about music, and now I think people are actually, it feels as an outsider as though the younger versions of our bands, or you know what I'm saying, like younger bands are just more interested in, they've heard what they've heard and they just want to do their thing and only their thing, and it's not about digging something up or referencing something or trying to like revisit a thing that they found inspirational. They seem to have a place where the inspiration already exists, and they want to perpetuate that, not just kind of living in anybody's shadow.
It was exactly like that in the mid-90s, though.
Yeah, I guess so.
You know, like, it was like that was the time that everyone forgot about the history. No one really talked about cool old bands. It was like,
well,
we've got a new thing. Instill is better than the Cro-Mags.
Well, it feels super 90s now. But anyway.
So where did, I guess, Rob the Anarchist Free Space.
Yeah.
That, to me, is the most famous Scare Tactic show.
Oh, yeah. That one. So I, Scare Tactic, we were like kind of on the scene at that point, but we weren't playing that many shows. And I think I had just started to get to know Mike, and I asked him if we could play this upcoming show. It was like the first Haymaker show in Toronto.
Yeah, it was Haymaker just formed, but it was Catharsis.
It was Catharsis, Haymaker, Shipwreck, maybe?
Maybe Shipwreck, yeah.
And Scare Tactic, and it might have been our first show as Scare Tactic. And Mike said, yeah, you can play, but you have to bring the PA. Which is like, you know, classic bargaining move there. And
it's like if you guys hadn't played, what would happen?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think also, you know, to us, we were like, well, fuck, we're going to play with Catharsis and Haymaker, the new Left 4 Dead band. Like, this is going to be amazing. Of course they can use our PA. So we land in the PA, and we're not really ready for what we're getting ourselves into.
Well, how because I knew, like, I didn't know. I was nervous. Everyone was nervous because the rumor had spread because they played that show the night before where they beat up Maharaj.
Yeah, that's...
Remember that?
Yeah, that was the night before.
That was like the night before.
Christ.
So
yeah.
we roll up and there's just like a bunch of weird...
Well, there was just like, you know, where there's these like pudgy green losers trying to like shout at everybody. And then Haymaker rolls up looking like the cast of fucking Slapshot or whatever.
Like ECW.
Yeah, like ECW wrestlers. And for some reason my guitar amp broke, or somebody's guitar amp broke. And I think I went up to Mike, or I can't remember if he was involved in this. So I was like, hey, man, is there an amp we can use? And he's like, ask Haymaker. And so, you know, in retrospect, they were friendly enough. But I just went up to Beckman, who was about 10 times the size of me at that point, and like shaking and sweating. I just was like, hey, my amp screwed up. Like, can I use yours? He's like, yeah, sure, but you got to load it in. So... So roll in this gigantic 70s Ampeg amp. I plug into it. I'm pretty sure I broke it while we were playing because I'd never plugged in an amplifier before. I just had like somebody else had always done it for me. So I'm pretty sure I plugged in the wrong thing and it like broke halfway through our set. The set was fine. Haymaker go on and instantly start throwing the microphone around like baseballs,
just spearing it,
smashing it, and like tearing the wires apart. And I'm looking at the PA, and I'm looking at Jesse, who owned the PA, and he's just sort of looking at me like, "What the hell do we do? Like, we can't do anything."
Can't do anything.
And then somebody was drinking like this disgusting 5-gallon water jug filled with like malt liquor, and it was just like the stench in there was out of control. Yeah. And nobody could move, thankfully, because it was really packed. But yeah, and then Catharsis was like an even weirder set. I remember sort of standing inside and outside for most of their set. I walked in the set to sort of check on how things were going, and I just heard him shouting, "Christ, Christ, Christ, release me, Christ!" And I was like, "I'm out of here."
Catharsis was always a weird fun one. That was
a good show, but that felt like. Yeah, I mean, that was like a funny thing, though, because I think all the other shows that I'd gone to that were in Kensington Market or not at like a club were small. Were really small, and that show was packed, and there were people from out of town, and there was 2 out-of-town bands.
You had the Last Examiner show with Ruination?
I was away on my big canoe trip.
Oh, yeah, this is the defining part of your early music career.
Well, yeah, I left.
Your double life as a canoeer and a hardcore kid.
Well, so I was always really interested in outdoors things, and I'd been going up north for years and spending a lot of time in the bush. And this was sort of like the last big trip that I was going to do before going away to school or sort of getting on with life. And I spent 2 months in the Northwest Territories and Alaska and the Yukon on this epic canoe trip, but it meant I missed... No, it was almost 3 months, actually. I mean, I meant I missed like the summer of hardcore, and I just started playing with. Okay, Board of Education was happening at that time.
Yeah, Board of Education.
And I left, and in this effort to sort of just be dicks, I guess, Board of Education started a band called Fuck Jonah, and recorded a demo and started playing shows.
But who would have been in Board of Education to form Fuck Jonah?
No,
Because I think it was none of them.
No, it was just a weird. It was like Mark Pesci and Martin and Jesse Parker and.
But Martin's not on the demo, right?
No, he sings.
Oh, he sings on the demo?
Yeah, he sings on the demo. But I actually like your brave listeners are hearing all these names from Toronto, past and present that you may or may not encounter. But I think the best song that has never been heard from that little funny early pocket of the punk scene in Toronto is the Simon Harvey fight song by Fuck Jonah. And the lyrics, "You never come to see us. It's getting in between us. It's getting in between us. You're such a fucking genius." Oh no, what was it? There was one like really got kicked out of Clevo for being too fucking emo. Stage dive and sink, you fat dink. It's a mean line.
Harsh lines.
Oh, Simon, if you're listening, sorry.
I know you are listening.
In the band. Yeah, it wasn't me. Back then, I was just... Simon's words, Jonah probably comes from one of those countries where they sit around in a circle in the dirt and beat instruments. And he's right. I was up there.
So where were you... So that summer was the summer that Last Year's Emmett show happened.
Yeah, so I missed everything, and that's when like the Our War demo came out.
Our War demo.
The Haymaker demo.
Yeah.
The Fighting Chance demo.
The Fighting Chance I thought it came out later.
I came out like right around the same time, and the Stop and Think demo actually, because I remember coming back from that trip and being like, okay, I got to catch up on hardcore, and I met up with Jesse, and we were driving around, and he's like, he had this stack of tapes, and it was Stop and Think, American Nightmare demo, Haymaker demo, and the Our War demo, and I was like beside myself because I thought like, oh, I missed everything. I'm like, did you see these bands? He's like, yeah. Stop and Think, Jesse Stanhard's new band.
Where do you see Stop and Think?
He went and saw them in the States somewhere.
Oh, weird.
And I don't remember why exactly, but yeah,
You're probably playing the American Nightmare.
Yeah, I can't remember where he saw American Nightmare either, but that like sort of turned around.
Because American Nightmare didn't come up with the demo. They came up when they had that first 7-inch, and they did that tour where they did 300 press.
Yeah.
Or whatever, or like a blue vinyl version or whatever. But that summer, Fuck Jonah quickly morphs into Career Suicide when Martin quits, right?
Well, see, I think you might have the story better. So the origin of Career Suicide for me is that Fuck Jonah started playing shows, and then they changed their name to Career Suicide.
No, Martin had gone, and Noah Gadke, future member of Career Suicide, one of the only holdovers from this lineup.
Yeah, and Chris McCann.
Moved to vocals.
Yeah.
Chris McCann.
Whose brother was in Guided by Voices, and Chris McCann is in the Powwows now.
Yeah, he played on guitar.
Yeah, and Mark also played guitar.
Mark Pesci.
And Mark Jarrett played drums. From Teen Crud. And Rotate This.
Eric Smith played drums.
Oh, Eric Smith. But also, Mark Jarrett played drums.
In Career Suicide later on.
No, but he played drums in like an early Fuck Jonah, early Career Suicide thing as well.
Okay, well, maybe, no, you guys played a show at Who's Am I? Remember you put watermelon on them and stuff? And you just got up and left in the middle of the set?
Oh, that's a good one.
But this was, no, because it was Eric, because then what happens is, somehow, you and Martin come back and just slip your way into Career Suicide.
Well, yeah, I guess they'd existed. They played one show with that band, United Supervillains.
Yeah, I was at that show.
At the El Macombo. And
the real Career Suicide show.
The real Career Suicide show, the real first show.
The real only show for Career Suicide.
Yeah, exactly.
For the scabs.
Yeah, then there was like a sort of coup, staged a coup.
Yes.
I just remember getting a call one Sunday morning from Martin, who was going to go jam with the drummer, Eric, at Cactus, which was 50 meters from my front door.
I guess we've never talked about Cactus on this podcast at all, but that is a...
Okay, yeah, we can do...
gotta talk a little
that's its own episode. I think you should. You know what? You should interview Steve.
No, I shouldn't.
Okay, don't.
No, I'm pretty happy with the way. But like...
Cactus Studios was a rehearsal place that was in an old stained glass factory, and a lot of unsavory and illegal stuff happened in there. And yeah.
While we were there, 3 people were murdered.
Yes. The first time I ever went there, which was to do this. Here's a cool tidbit for Turned Out a Punk. It was I was asked to be in a band with Steve Perry on vocals, Chris Callahan on drums, Martin on bass, and me on guitar. And Steve wanted to call it Liberace, and Chris wanted to call it the Ice Cream Men and dress up like ice cream men. And it was.
I think too bad the Weirdo's name was taken.
Yeah, exactly. And then here's your like holy grail of dog poo is that I have a 4-track recording that I made of the Liberace practice.
How have I not heard this joke?
Yeah, it's in a drawer in my parents' house somewhere.
Let's go find it.
But you need a 4-track recorder.
Well, I'll rent one
to get the thing.
I'll rent one.
And anyway, so the first time I went to Cactus, I went to go pee. And the guy that ran the place at that time, I can't remember what he looked like. He had like a pencil mustache and sort of receding hairline. Had a Ziploc bag that could hold, like a watermelon or something full of cocaine. And he followed me into the bathroom stall where I was trying to go pee. And he's like, "Are we doing this?" And I was like, "I just have to pee, man."
Are we doing this?
And he's like, "This isn't cool." And I'm like, "Never mind." And I like pushed my way out. It was awful.
Anyway. But we kept going back.
Anyway, so yeah, I went to this practice and there was no guitar player, and I started playing "I Hate Music" by The Mad.
What were you supposed to play?
I don't know. I was just playing guitar that day, and I was really into Killed by Death, and I was really into the Angry Samoans, and I was really into the Germs, and I was just playing all Germs and Angry Samoans and like every song off of Killed by Death 1, which I just sort of like learned from listening. And Eric knew all those songs too. And then Eric just said, "Okay, you got to be in the band." And I was like, "What band?" He's like, "Career Suicide, you're in the band." And I was just in, and I started practicing with him. That was like 2001 or something.
So it was you,
Noah, Martin, and Eric.
Yeah, Noah moved to bass.
Yeah.
And that lineup, is that actually the one that recorded on the 7-inch or no?
No. So like the again, like the dates are all screwy with Career Suicide.
Oh,
so
the LP's first.
Yeah, we recorded the demo in Eric's house on Humewood, up at like St. Clair and Vaughan, and that was Eric, Noah, me, and Martin, and then we went into Audiolab Studios and we recorded the album, which would become the Ugly Pop LP.
Right across the street from Cactus Studios.
Right across from Cactus Studios, and right down the road from Sheebie Jeebies.
And it's like kind of that studio for this era of punk that we're talking about.
Yeah. And
that was our Dawn Fury.
Yeah, Eric found that place, and Chris Heggie used to do sound at the Elma Combo too. And
he did recorded like everyone from like Brutal Nights to
Nights, Fucked Up, Career Suicide, Endless Blockade, Sailboats Are White, No Time Left from Buffalo.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of those
bands started coming in to get recorded by him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was nuts. But then, so that record, also fellow punk historian Stuart Schrader of the very great Shitfi blog was hanging out on the whole recording session for the first LP.
Really?
Yeah,
he was just in Toronto.
He was just in town visiting Simon, and he was there, and he sang backups. I'm pretty sure on our Chronic Sick cover because he was a local New Jersey guy.
He used to do Game of the Arseholes, a zine that's come up in here many a time.
Oh, yeah, that's a good zine.
Great zine, one of my favorite zines.
I like his style a lot. Anyway, so that record was like never properly, didn't come out very quickly. It was sort of delayed. I can't remember. It was like delayed with pressing or delayed with printing or delayed with mixing or the test presses were bad.
There was a test press that went with you guys to Europe. That's the first pressing is a completely different sounding record.
Yeah, it's really tinny, and the bass is, with all due respect, Noah, if you tune into the show, is terrible.
He's a good bass player otherwise now, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, maybe
I played in bands with him afterwards.
Yeah, Noah basically just had like hammers for hands back then, and in some songs he would, it worked perfectly because it was just like this useless band. But that we went on a European tour as like our first ever tour, our first show outside of Toronto, let alone, outside of the basement was, 14 days in Europe on the strength of a demo tape And then we brought this LP with us. After the LP was recorded, we went into the studio again and recorded a 7-inch.
Didn't the 7-inch come out in time for that European tour? Didn't Hank have that with you?
Yeah, he did. So technically the 7-inch came out first, and Hank from Kangaroo Records, who heard our demo because Martin had dropped it off at Independent Outlet in Amsterdam on a trip to visit his grandmother in Hungary.
And also visit Boris.
And to visit Boris, yeah. I think Boris was living in Amsterdam at then, right?
Yeah.
Boris, for those of you listening, is credited as playing bass on the SARS EP.
Yeah,
he's holding a spatula.
He's got Martin's got duct tape all over his
Martin
face.
has like a duct tape Hitler mustache and...
some very poor choices. Man.
Yeah, it's like ridiculously bad. But
that's right, that Boris never actually played on the record.
No, but interestingly enough, he is a highly respected and highly skilled violin player.
Fucked Up has collaborated since.
Yeah, that's right. More than once. He was on Year of the Ox, and
we did the live thing at CBC,
the CBC
too.
thing with him, and yeah. Anyway, the first single came out in time for us to go to Europe, and that had Chris Callahan on drums because we had no drummer.
Oh yeah, Eric quit to move away.
Eric quit and became. His wife had a job publishing in Vancouver, and Eric got the job, which he quotes as like his most hated or something. He was listening to wiretaps for the RCMP on mobsters that were snitching on other mobsters or something like that. It was like insane job. Maybe I can't even say that. Who can say?
Well, we didn't say who he was.
Yeah, exactly. First single came out, and then SARS came out after that, and then finally the Red LP was released with a new mix.
Yeah, with
and a new bass track.
You guys went in and re-recorded for it.
Yeah, I re-recorded the bass track with. I read in some old zine that Bobby Steele used an MXR Distortion Plus with a Gibson Marauder guitar through an Ampeg V4. So I actually had a Marauder, and I bought it on that first European tour. But I used that exact setup to try and play the bass because I thought it would sound like 70s Misfits.
Yeah.
It just sounds like, like a 90s era technology recording studio playing like throwback music from the 80s in the 21st century. So, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it unfortunately always goes with a lot of those attempts to make something sound old.
Yeah, big time.
So, you guys kind of get back from there. But Fucked Up, you were already in Fucked Up by this point, right? By the first European tour. How did that happen? How did Mike... this is before I'm in the band. I don't like these are...
Yeah, actually I have a really funny memory. So I can't remember. I guess Career Suicide and Fucked Up formed like really close together. Fucked Up was like March of 2001, I think. Or March of 2002, something like that. And I went to see... Nine Shocks Terror downstairs at the El Macambo. And I saw Mike there, and we were talking, and I had bought some record, and maybe we were talking about some record or whatever. And we were both talking about No Justice and Genetic Control. And he's like, I'm going to do a band that sounds like Urban Waste, No Justice, Genetic Control, and Agnostic Front. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. Whatever, and then we didn't really talk much more that night. And I got an email from him a few days later that wasn't like, "Hey man, like good talking to you the other day. It's cool that you're like into those bands." We'd talked already, and I think we'd done a tape trade or something.
Well, he was one of the guys bigging up As One.
Yeah, Mike was like
Scare Tactic.
Totally behind Career Suicide and As One. And Scare Tactic, he thought it was cool and had nice things to say about us. It was great, which felt good because he can be like a hard nut to crack. So it was a nice thing. And then I got this email from him that said, not like, do you know how to play drums or do you want to be in a band? But it was, do you have access to a drum kit? ? And I was like, that's funny. I don't remember asking Mike if I could play a show or anything. So I said, yeah, I do, which was not true. And he says, do you know how to play them? And I said, oh, totally, which was also not true. And he's like, okay, well, we're going to do this band. Here's, like I said, blah, blah, blah. We're going to practice. It's like me and Josh and Sandy from Mods and Rockers or whatever.
See, that's weird because, like, at the same time, Mike, Josh, Blake, from They Live and Tear It Up.
Oh yeah, he was in town a ton. Right?
Yeah. We lived in Toronto for a while. We lived with Mike and Lisa and them. And Chris Cullen and Josh and I were going to form this band where Josh and I were going to be dual lead singers.
Oh my god.
And Blake was on... No, Chris Cullen was on drums. I don't know what Blake was doing there.
Blake was a drummer.
But I think he was playing bass. I think he was playing bass on that one, and Mike was a guitar player. And that was kind of, remember, the same time as Fucked Up, and then all of a sudden Fucked Up became like kind of a real band.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, we went and had these practices, and the songs were kind of good right away. And I really didn't know what I was doing. I also, this is like my most popular folklore maybe with people that have known me for a long time, is that I like to, like, I sort of have trouble admitting things right away, and I didn't want to tell my parents that I was going to go be in this hardcore punk band with people they'd never met and didn't know. And so I would just create these like elaborate ruses for the first however many years of the band.
Like years and years.
And so I remember the first Fucked Up practice. This is coming back. I used to have this like ridiculous polo shirt that looked like something that Chandler from Friends would wear. And I was like a much heavier guy back then. And so it was this really baggy black polo with red and white stripes like down the middle, kind of like Guy Fieri meets Chandler. And I wore these like maybe white trousers, and I told my parents I was going to go to the Insomnia Cafe on Bloor Street to meet a friend or whatever. And I hid my drumsticks in my like belt, in like the belt line of my pants. And then I was supposed to be there at like 6 o'clock or whatever. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go now. And I like got on the bus so that it would like appeared.
Because the practice is around the corner.
Yeah, so I like waited for the bus across the street in the direction that it was going. And my parents were like, okay, see you later. I was like, yeah, bye. And got off one stop later and sprinted around the block to the practice space and showed up. And I had to be like, I was so nervous because I actually didn't know how to play drums and I didn't know these people at all. So I was like, I kind of remember trying to be Mr. Personality and like doing dumb, funny stuff like jumping while playing drums. But it all kind of gelled pretty fast, I have to say. And we wrote, like, there was the first song Fucked Up ever wrote in that incarnation, I think, was called Sirens. I can still kind of vaguely remember the riff. And then shortly thereafter, we played our first show opening for Crispus Attucks.
Nope.
No.
Cost was the first show, that weird Alex McDonald party with some friends of ours from Halifax.
Was that really? That was like the second show.
I think that was before Crispus Attucks, right?
No, I'm almost positive the first show was Crispus Attucks at Planet Kensington, and we covered Remind Them by Agnostic Front and Nervous Breakdown by Black Flag, and you were in the front row.
And I chokeslammed Josh.
And you chokeslammed Josh.
Just kicked me in the nuts.
He kicked you in the nuts. And that night as well, it was the night before my final exam of high school, and so I obviously didn't have the guts to tell my parents that I was going to go play a punk band show with my punk band instead of studying for my exam. So I just packed a book bag and hid some drumsticks in there and said I was going to the Robarts Library to study. And they were like, well, why are you going to go there? I was like, I just need some space, you know? I just really need like the piece. And they're like, okay, can we give you a lift? I was like, no, I don't think so. They're like, well, yeah, we'll give you a ride. I'm like, okay. So I went to Robarts. Drove me to Robarts Library. And I went into the stacks, and I did study for like 2 hours, but I was like too excited about this show, and like walked to Kensington Market, and they just had hours to fucking kill wandering around Kensington. And then we played this show. I got home after a hard day of studying at midnight, and I finished high school the next day, and
what was the time we were away?
First day of the rest of my life, kind of thing.
There was the time we were away on a tour. I think it was one of our first tours, and you told your parents that you were at a cottage. And you had there's something where you were late and you had to say I'm staying an extra day at the cottage.
Oh yeah, I mean that sounds so likely. It's like of all the things, you know, like you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna go do this thing. I'm gonna play this music, and I had to come up with some elaborate excuse.
That's probably why the hardest working member of this band to this day because you've always had to work to be in this band.
Because I have to maintain cover.
You just constantly.
I'm like Donnie Brasco. I'm in too deep now.
You're in way too deep, Jonah.
Everybody's like, just come back. You're. There's like a whole team of people. They're like, okay, you're at Robarts. You're reading about like, you know, picture of Dorian Gray in the shipping news or whatever.
Isn't it Portrait of Dorian Gray?
You can tell how hard I studied.
You should have been studying.
I was born for the road, baby.
What was that weird show you guys played at Cost? Cost, which is a brunch establishment.
Cost is now called like Nirvana, I think, or I don't know. But that show was...
I think it's still called Cost, no?
No, it's not. The Cost is in Kensington Market now. It's called something else, and it's been refurbished. Yeah, I don't remember. It was like maybe the New Breed from Halifax or like some kind of indie band. Our longtime friend Alex McDonald, who is she somehow managed to put this show together. It wasn't really her thing to put together gigs, but she was at every show. And
she did a couple shows. It was like always her friends' bands from Halifax. We went to school a bit. She would do these shows, and it was like, I remember that one being super weird, but I think it was Scare Tactic, Career Suicide, and Fucked Up.
Yeah, you're right.
That was the first, all three.
That's crazy, too, because, I mean, like, bless Alex for giving it a shot. It must have been awful. I don't remember anything about that show, other than that it definitely happened. But this is again, like, if I realize this is all over the place, but you're getting like a funny geography of the old crappy venues in Toronto, like Cost. Cost was just like a gross diner.
It's a diner.
It was a disgusting like little diner that had...
It's still open, Joe. Let's go easy on it.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
It wasn't that bad.
Well, it was gross back then. And like... It wasn't a venue. It was just a giant dining room, and they moved some tables, and you could play in like the back dining room.
They had like a step stage.
Eventually, they built a stage. And actually, I feel like Career Suicide played a great show.
Yeah, you guys with Violent Minds.
Yeah, with Violent
Knife
Minds.
Fight.
Oh man. Yeah.
Well, no, Mental.
No, that was Mental, Knife Fight, Violent Minds. Career Suicide show was like something else.
No, Career Suicide did play
we definitely,
Violent Minds too, I think, right?
Oh, we know Career Suicide.
Another time with Violent Minds.
We have played with Violent Minds before, but I can't remember when. Might have been at a Q bar.
I saw you guys there, and that was one of the best times I ever saw Career Suicide.
Yeah, I remember you like paying a nice compliment.
Yeah,
I really appreciated it. We covered the Kids, I think, at that show. We covered like Do You Love the Nazis?
I could have sworn that was the one where
you might be right.
No Warren or Violent Minds found that dude that looked kind of like Ozzy Osbourne,
and they did Sweet Leaf.
Yeah, with that guy.
That wasn't that show, because I know that we definitely didn't play that show.
I don't think Violent Minds played that Mental Knife Fight show though.
No, they did. No, you're right. It was Mental Knife Fight and Life's Halt or something.
No.
Maybe it was Career Suicide. I don't know. But
Career Suicide definitely played the show. Fuck Career Suicide Mental Show.
Oh yeah, so that was an amazing show. So and again, like
really early on too.
Really early days, but like if this show happened now, I feel like it would be really big. And so it was.
If this
Tear It Up, headlining.
Yeah.
Mental, Think I Care, Fucked Up.
No, it was
Career Suicide.
The bill was the tour that was booked.
Yeah.
Was Think I Care opening for Tear It Up.
Yeah.
Mental had just jumped on.
Oh yeah.
A bunch of the shows on that tour.
Right.
Including the show in Toronto.
Right. So Career Suicide, Fucked Up, Mental, Think I Care, Tear It Up.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good show for the early 2000s. That's like an amazing. And of course Toronto, it's like dead as a fucking doornail.
None of those. I think I Care was kind of at their like peakish.
Musically,
yeah, musically, like, and all, but popularity wise, Tear It Up was kind of on a bit of the decline. Like,
yeah, they were on a later record.
Yeah, and it was before anyone cared about Mental at all. And Career Suicide and Fucked Up were just local jokes.
Yeah, and Mental. I remember I got the Mental demo at that show.
Me too.
Talking to DFJ at the bar, like after our set. And okay, anyway, the context of this show is basically that like. I can't exactly remember. Somebody in Career Suicide was late. We were supposed to play first, which made sense because we were like a local band.
I know. What happened was you guys were supposed to play first, but then Mental jumped on, and Mike's like, "Oh, you guys got to play first because Career Suicide's not even here yet."
Oh yeah.
And then Greg was like, "I don't want to play because I want to wait till my friends from No Warning get here before we play."
Yeah.
And Mike's like, "Too bad, you got to play." So, Mental played. one of the most bitter sets I've ever seen a band do in my life.
Yeah, they were just like, yo, fuck the Suicide Party. But actually, like, it sucked because I was like, I knew that they drove from like Boston to play, and you know me, I'm like Captain Meek over here. I'm just like, yo, we'll play, just like delay the show. And Noah was late, or Martin was late. They were coming straight from work or something. And, Mental went on first, and I was like, man, I know that no matter what happens, like, Career Suicide, at this point especially, was very untight.
Yeah,
and Mental goes on, and they had the power of anger on their side, like, punk, hardcore is supposed to be, like, angry, energy release music. Mental was like, we just fucking drove, like, 12 hours to get here, and we're playing first for, like, 6 people, and our friends aren't even here yet. This sucks. They were so good, and like Greg Mental looked like he was like bouncing off the walls. It was awesome, and then we went up there, and it was just like such a fucking train wreck, in my opinion, because I was like all nerves.
But Fucked Up got it after Career Suicide.
Yeah.
And it was okay.
Yeah, it was good.
Because Career Suicide had set the stage.
Yeah, exactly. It was like Mental good, Career Suicide, shambolic, Fucked Up, not bad, and then Think I Care did their thing.
They were awesome.
Was killer.
It was the day after they had that beef with that band, Something in the Water.
Oh man!
And they were talking about it on stage, and it's like,
nobody.
Toronto's a little backwater.
Yeah.
So
everybody's like, "What do you mean? There's something in the water, eh?"
Yeah, there's like 4 of us that kind of got what was going on.
Norwalk? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, and I remember Tear It Up at that show. Andy, who we recently reconvened with on the Descendants tour, his guitar malfunctioned 2 or 3 times, and like any rational person would, he fastball pitched his guitar at the wall and smashed it into like 2 pieces, rendering his guitar pretty much inoperable for the rest of the night.
Those were the good times. Well, Jonah, I think we filled this one out a little bit more.
Yeah, we did it. You got your extra hour. It's 2 a.m. now or more, and
I gotta go have a bath.
Damian's gonna head in the bath.
My night's just beginning. This is my
I'm gonna pass out.
Post-show ritual.
There's some trashy British television on Channel 1.
Kate Nash is in this. I'm trying to figure out which actress is Kate Nash. It said on the credits while playing in the background.
Hey, well, maybe that's for your listeners to guess.
Yes, we were watching. It's a contest.
Name that show. It's silent and you can't see it.
You too can win membership in Career Suicide.
Yeah, that's really all it takes to be a bass player in this band.
We're going to have you back for a part 2, buddy. I hope you know.
Oh, really?
And eventually. And when we do a part 2, I want it just to be dissecting the various lineups of Career Suicide.
I will lose so many friends.
Because I don't think we have to be harshly critiquing the human beings.
Once I'm in the safety of like a...
He doesn't know. No. Career Suicide. We're not going to go into the people.
No.
But there's Career Suicide, MK1 with none of you.
Gunshot?
Was that a gunshot? Or a toilet backing up?
I don't know. Anyway.
You know this area better than I.
A toilet backing up doesn't sound like Braca.
It might sound like that.
Okay, go on.
Okay, so it's MK1, which is none of you guys.
Yeah.
Right? And then Eric and Noah go on into MK2.
Yeah.
And then MK3 is when Callahan leaves.
MK 2.5 is Callahan on drums.
But that recorded.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay, so Eric leaves. 2.5 is Callahan on drums.
And then what's the European lineup? Like, who played bass when you first went to Europe?
Oh, Gabby Resch.
So Gabby joined the band.
So Gabby moved to Amsterdam to work in a paper mill or something, or just to get away from it all.
And Martin had just randomly met Gabby somewhere else in Canada, right?
Well, Gabby and Martin were like good buddies in Vancouver. They were good friends from being out in Vancouver together. And then Mark III was Jesse on drums and Bennett on bass.
Yep.
And then Mark IV was
Miller. Enter the Miller.
Miller.
No, wait. We're forgetting Mike Halachuk. Wasn't Mike Halachuk?
Mike played one show with us. Oh, he played a couple shows with us on bass, actually, and he went to Japan with us.
Yeah.
So he's in there for sure.
Does he record anything?
He never recorded anything. Legendarily. And Mike's a good bass player. So actually, the Japan lineup, Mark, whatever that was like our best. That was the best it's been. And like right now, it's the best it's been. But back to Mark Hurst from Chicago. Okay, we're skipping ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Jesse Bennett, Miller Jesse, Jesse leaves. Mark and Halachuk go to Japan.
Mark Hurst
from Punch in the Face wound up and booking shows in Chicago. Go to Japan. We get back. Jesse's still on drums. Mike plays a few more shows with us on bass. And then Mike leaves. Miller full time. Eventually Jesse leaves. And we get Dave Brown on drums. And that takes us up to... Oh, and then when Dave Brown was first starting on drums, we had already committed ourselves to having Brandon Farrell from Municipal Waste and Direct Control and Government Warning play drums on the album.
And he did a tour with you guys before that, right?
He did a tour with us on second guitar, and we played one show with him on drums. And we later played one show with him on drums a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And then... so Dave Brown and Miller was like the longest lasting lineup. Miller left the band to move back to Winnipeg, or move out to Ottawa. He got married, had a couple kids, drives an 18-wheeler now, hauling beans across the border, and being a great guy. And John Sharon from Brutal Nights. And Union of Uranus and every other million. Chokehold, every other band. We still make fun of him for that to this day. He gets in on bass. Dave Brown no longer in the band, and we get Ian Romano. And
from Attacking
Black and Daniel Romano's band, and then Dallas Good joins the band on second guitar.
Mercedes.
And that was around the same time as Ian joining the band. And so now we've got like the ultimate lineup of men over 40 and people who look like they're under 20.
I think we're going to have... I'm going to say there's going to be like 10 distinct Career Suicide lineups.
I was asked in an interview once, if I was your potential employer, you're a band that has had 10 different record labels, 25 ex-members... and you've been around for 15 years, I wouldn't hire you for 1 second.
What 10 different record labels?
Yeah, this was the Korea Times in Seoul asking these questions.
Because I was going to say, like,
they just went from Wikipedia.
Yeah, because the only, like, you guys have done one-offs on other labels, but I'd say Ugly Pop and Deranged.
Ugly Pop, Deranged, Slasher,
So
Kangaroo,
like one-offs.
Way back when.
One-offs.
But for them, I guess they were just looking at this list and they were like, what the hell is your deal?
But, like, I mean, I act funny because I had this exact conversation with someone backstage tonight, and I can't remember who it was, about, like, them asking me about Career Suicide and Deranged Records. I'm like, yeah, Career Suicide is going to be doing records on Deranged.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah, we're indentured servants.
Indentured servants.
To the G-Man.
Still paying off the first tour debt.
Big D. He's like, yeah, I don't know. You still owe us for those split 12 inches, man, that you brought to Columbus Fest or whatever.
Oh, yeah. We could also go through Career Suicide. One of my favorite bands in the history of Toronto punk, 100%. But at the same time, a band with a lot of superfluous records.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
When he split.
Oh, yeah.
Picture disc.
Oh, yeah. I think about this all the time. If I could, like, pare down the at least number of songs. So right now, we're at, like, Bliarg level of song numbers. I think, like, only Spaz has about the same amount of songs, you know what I mean?
The new stuff sounds so good, though.
Oh, thank you very much. We have, yes, so we can end there by shamelessly self-promoting and saying that Career Suicide is a new LP coming on the aforementioned Prisoner Records. And, no, I'm just kidding, Gord. It's called Machine Response, and it's 11 brand new songs. And we are self-releasing an EP, which will be out in a few months. And it features you, actually, twice.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
finally.
now I'm MK11.
That's right. You're on the list.
I'm in the list now.
It's like
I never performed in any Career Suicide records prior.
No, you hadn't, and now you have actually the most dramatic feature. You're like a character in a very descriptive old Australian punk tune about a prison riot, and then also
that you and me discovered together that record.
That was one of the best
circles.
That was one of the best record days. Egg Records
in Brisbane.
It was one of the best record days ever.
That was a great record day. That was a fun. Like sometimes you and me when we're on tour, we get those days where we walk forever to a record store, and we always get something good to eat. We had shitty food that day, but it was still good company.
On paper, killer day. nice walk through town, couple cold drinks, great stack of records. Discovered this band Mechalisa. Walk back. It's happy hour for oysters at a pub.
Hung out. Didn't we also hang out with like the Swellers? Like we met those guys, the Swellers.
Oh,
and
yeah,
they went
that's
to
right.
the walk with us too.
Yeah, that's right. Kill it.
Yeah. What a fun day.
What a fun day.
All right.
Thanks, Damian.
Thanks, buddy.
No problem.
Now we've done it. Now we've actually done a real Jonah Turned Out a Punk. Before it felt like kind of we were half stepping.
Yeah, we were just going through the motions a bit. But
Yeah.
this is about as real as it gets. You can hear the covers crinkling, about to turn in. The bath is running.
We're gonna turn off the light. I'm gonna kiss Diesel Boy goodnight, and that's gonna be it.
Diesel Boy will be for part 2.
Yeah.